We are live. So 2 weeks ago, we talked about an optimistic superhero movie that was to, usher in something new and fresh. And that movie, by DC was Superman in both title and quality. And this indeed was fantastic for the first steps into something new. I don't think this was quite as good as Superman, but I can somewhat see why Marvel figured, no, let's have these two compete. Let's not move the, you know. Um, so yes, I will be starting with a review that is only going to spoil the MCU up to this point, and then I get into the spoilers, but not, I'll warn verbally before I get into any spoilers for this movie. The movie is rated PG-13, so will this video be? And yeah, I loved this movie. So, I think, yeah, basically, this is, set in the 1960s, and yeah, we're seeing, the Fantastic Four. We don't have to sit through the, you know, the origin story. For those who are unaware of it, yes, it is, reiterated fairly early in the movie. So you're not going to be like, well, how did this even happen? You're just not, they're not going to spend forever showing it. They describe it, and we get a little bit of like, it's actually almost like, it's sufficiently heavily implied. We see like footage from shortly before the fateful mission to space, and then we hear like sounds of it going wrong and such. But yeah, similar to Superman, this shows multiple things that the Fantastic Four have to deal with, and they are kind of established. Like they say fairly early on, I forget exact. No, I think it has indeed been 4 years. So they're doing like a special TV, thing about how it's now been 4 years, and yeah, they're like really popular. It's been so long since I read like classic Fantastic Four. I could imagine some of the oldest ones do have that because like there was a while where in comic books, there was this sense of of course these people are these heroes are going to be popular with the regular public, and yeah, I quite appreciate it. It's we see so many where it's either unclear, or sometimes it's mixed, and sometimes it is like, no, they actually hate this, heroic figure. And I'm not saying all of those are bad, but it's nice to get one where it is genuinely like, no, they're like, I mean, the way that people react to seeing them in public, it's almost more like they're like sports stars or celebrities or something, and yeah, I quite like that. I do think if we had like superheroes, yeah, a lot of people would act like there's a bit where some school children, like I think 9-year-olds, a bunch of 9-year-olds, like see the Thing, and so they shout for him to lift a car. I feel like that is the kind of thing that would happen in the real world. They're not treated, they're not really like worshipped as such. They're looked up to, and yeah, like sometimes people will try to like yeah, journalists will ask them questions about like they're almost like they are, let's see, I guess I definitely felt like there was some maybe like Fauci going on, like how yeah, when there was a new development, he would get on camera, get in front of a microphone and explain the new thing. And yeah, I do think that is a credible depiction of like superheroism, and yeah, I felt like it was the right choice. Yeah, this does well at psychological accuracy. Everyone feels like you know of well, let's see. Every major character feels like a human being. There are some that are not given as much depth as I would like and as I felt like there was room for, and maybe some of these characters didn't need to be in the movie if they weren't going to do more than they ended up doing. But the ones that get significant screen time, yeah, there's a lot of depth and layers to them. I suppose this is a good time to talk about, so the following isn't really a criticism of the movie so much as the marketing. There were a couple of things where they hint at something, and maybe they'll do more with it later. This is only the first appearance. The marketing made it seem like it was going to be a thing, and it ends up not really being a thing. In this one, it's more like set up for later. Like I said, this is criticism of the marketing. I went into this thinking there was going to be some of that, and there ended up not being. I'm not disappointed. The marketing didn't oversell the movie. In fact, in some ways, like it was better than I thought based on trailers and such. And the trailers made me really excited, so that's praise, high praise. Yeah, the authenticity is quite good, and this is one of those things where it's the authenticity is good. Obviously, there are some elements here that are not. It's one like. It was one thing when, sometimes the MCU will, yeah, it's not the first time, but here the MCU is doing something that is very different from what actually, it's the 60s, but you have flying, the Fantastic Four have a flying car, the Fantastic Car. I love the name branding in some of these comic book properties. And yeah, there are aspects where they have this really futuristic technology. I don't know. I'll admit that it's silly. I do sometimes have an easier time accepting that in like a present day setting. It feels like, okay, it's basically our world, but they also have this where like, I don't know. Somehow I just feel like if it was back then, the world would look more different. Maybe anyway. I think this is a good time to bring up. I thought that okay, I guess that is kind of a spoiler. Yeah, what I'll say is, for the world that it creates, yes, it felt largely authentic. There's a pretty good level of detail. There were a few things where the movie has to cover a lot of ground. That was the choice they made. So they do kind of, there are things where we see them briefly, or it's mentioned and such, and not really gone into. Right, I guess this is a good place to put. If you are not really familiar with the MCU, this is a perfectly fine place to start. You are not going to be lost in the slightest based on that. Like, there's a couple of things where, if you don't know the comics, something might be like, wow, how is that? Maybe we should spend a little bit more time on that. But I think largely there's been just enough time that newbies are going to be fine, because it's not the most like complex, like the complex stuff they spend time on, but yeah, it absolutely does not require any like, honestly, I can't rule out that there might be some people watching this movie and like leaving it and thinking, so I guess this has nothing to do with the MCU, because like there's not, I won't give away if there's any, but I'll definitely say there's not much connective tissue. And I thought that really worked, There is an explanation, which I'm not going to give away before the spoiler section. Let's see, but yeah, tonally, I really, I hope, I don't need every single one of these movies to be like this, but I do hope that more of these movies are going to have this sense of hope and optimism. And that's also where it makes a ton of sense to have it set during the 60s. That was a decade with a ton of optimism for the future, And it's also just, it's almost hard to believe that this, like, okay, right, I should say, I'm not going to be spoiling, before I get into the spoiler section, the other Fantastic Four movies. I have watched 3 of the 4. I did not watch the 94 one. To be clear, I don't have any problem with Roger Corman. I seriously respect this thing of like, well, we have the sets. Why tear them down now when we can film 2 more movies on them? I that's a can-do attitude, and I'm here for it. watched several of his movies. I don't know that I think any of them are like amazing, but like, yeah, B movie. Recently, this is a good place to plug the Morbid Zoo. She did 2 videos. One of them is like on Final Destination primarily, and one of them, let's see, I think it's Elevated Horror is part of the title. So make sure you watch those. She discusses the idea of a B movie. Let's see. I think, yeah, right. So briefly, I swear I'm not going to spend forever on the '94 movie since I haven't even watched it. I am not going to be comparing to it. I've only seen clips. I've seen reviews and such. I am not super comfortable with, and I don't judge anyone who is. I'm not personally super comfortable with watching a leak. I don't like, because I feel like, and I realize a lot of people are not doing this. Anthony Gramuglia watched it, did a really solid. I found it very interesting to hear him say what he thought of the movie. He also talked about the other ones. Yeah, excellent video. I think Nostalgic's video on casting Fantastic Four, also good. I didn't necessarily agree with everything he said, but yeah. Anyway, yes, I feel like I would be judging an unfinished movie, and it's hard for me to put into words how much I hate the idea of like that. I gotta say that was something that really bothered me when people were talking about. Let's see, that was the work print of X-Men Origins Wolverine. Like, listen, that movie, I watched the final product. It's not a good movie, but judging the work print and like, yeah, you had people like, I'm gonna move on. Anyway, that's why I haven't watched it. I am not otherwise opposed to it. Like, honestly, tell you what, if at some point, I don't know, maybe Disney could buy the rights and like finish it, like a Mortal Kombat, fatality, I would watch that because I like. Let's see. I'm afraid I forget his name, but the guy who plays like Ben Grimm, the Thing, big fan of him. Yeah. Anyway, I think yeah. It's. I'm not certain about that one, the '94 one, but the other 3, they're not set in the '60s. And I get the idea of like, oh, are people not going to reject the idea? Maybe, but you know what? Maybe then you shouldn't be making a Fantastic Four movie. Maybe at the time it just isn't right. Because trying to take these characters immediately out of the 1960s, I think it's been demonstrably proven by now, does not work. Like they have been doing this for 31 years now. This is the 5th movie overall. And yeah, 4 of these were made about 10 years apart. And it's only now that they actually, there was only one of those movies that were popular enough, profitable enough to warrant a sequel. And that sequel was so unpopular that they didn't make more sequels, but they kept trying to reboot it, and they kept just not doing the 60s. Like, I'm sorry, did we learn nothing from The Incredibles? So yeah. I'm not saying that I'm not going to give away whether it happens here. It's the MCU. Probably eventually they're going to appear outside of the 1960s. But if you don't start them in the 1960s, like these are characters who I've read a bunch of the comics, some from the 60s, some from later, a bunch from like the early 2000s and such. These were always characters that were not as much in the comics, but, there's... In comics, like, time is a little bit more, like, in flux. Like, you can have something in one decade that feels like another decade, and it's okay. Like, we kind of accept, there's characters who are in present-day stories. Well, Magneto, I guess I don't want to talk about his backstory here, but you might know it, It's tied to a significant historical event. He's still around somehow in stories today. We just kind of accept that in comic books. But in a movie, it's really difficult because these characters are so tied to it. It was easier with other 60s characters like the X-Men and Spider-Man. But the Fantastic Four, so tied to this. I'm really glad that, again, like I've said it in other videos, the MCU... I'm not saying it's perfect, it definitely isn't. I found something to love about every single of their feature films and almost all of their shows. or, I mean, right now, really, Inhumans is the only one where I just was like, okay, this does not work. Haven't watched the last few, but anyway, the MCU are just really good at finding a way to bring these characters from the page onto the silver screen in a way that a mainstream audience can largely accept. Occasionally they misstep, but yeah, I don't think this is one of those missteps. But yeah, let's see. Right, more tone stuff. This captures some of the big stuff with Fantastic Four is, you need like a big adventure. One of the movies that feels the most like, wow, that should have been a Fantastic Four adventure is Quantumania, and I'm not going to give away exactly how, but I do think this one lives up to the sense of adventure that, yeah, again, the other, the three Fantastic Four movies that I've watched just don't capture. Some of them seem like they're not even trying. And the fact that they really feel like a family, the chemistry is there, and yeah, the way they treat each other feels like a family, where before it did feel, there was always this slight remove of and some of the characters were just too one note, too exaggerated for us to really relate to, and the way that they treated each other just didn't feel, it just didn't really work. And here it does, yeah, sometimes the MCU just really gets, yeah. It felt like they took some of the comics and just put them on the screen. Something the MCU, has shown they're really good at, and that's also something Superman does really well. The 2025 version of Superman. I think, yeah. So the dialogue also, they do a good job of making everyone have a distinct voice. Everyone feels like yeah, like that's something that character would say. I think this is a good place to put the recent MCU stuff is getting better at getting back to one of the things that really worked about Phase 1. It does not undermine the serious moments with a joke or the like. There are jokes, but they don't tend to undermine. Like, I think there's at least one that maybe sort of does, but, and I'll definitely grant there's at least one joke where I was like, okay, this is taking forever, please move on. Like, I think they spent maybe 2 whole minutes on one gag, and it wasn't that funny of a gag. I'll talk about it in the thought section unless I forget. In which case, ask me in the comments. But don't ask me in the comics because I don't read comics anymore. I'd like to. Anyway, yeah. Let's see. Yeah. There were several moments where I was sitting in the theater and I was like, don't blow it. Don't have a silly joke. And they didn't. They actually, and there's times where we're allowed to sit. We get to feel our feelings. It's wonderful. I really miss that. That was something, again, look, not saying the MCU was, there was a while when the MCU was bad at that. I'm telling you, go back and watch some Phase 1. They used to be really good at it. They used to really grip you. Sometimes people forget. I'm not saying Iron Man 1 is perfect. It's definitely problematic. I'm progressive. I'm way more progressive than that movie is in some ways. Anyway, it let us feel, stuff had a chance to land, and yeah, there would be quips, but it wouldn't be undermining the stuff that was heavy and sad. Let's see. Yeah, the direction is really solid. It works very well the way that, like, early on, there's essentially, like, montages. Like, you see them use their powers and save people and such. You see several, like, adventures that feel right out of the comics. Some of them are right out of the comics. And were explained about their powers and the origin story. And then, yeah, there's a while where they focus on one specific thing. I am not entirely sure. Okay, by the end of the spoiler-free review, you'll know if I've decided to share what that is. But I did think it was an interesting choice, and I think it absolutely works. Yeah, the story and, like, character stuff really works throughout. There was no point where I felt like, oh, this was written just to like, okay, maybe one or two things, but overall, not really felt like, okay, this was written just because they wanted a joke here or they wanted an action scene here. It felt like it arose organically from the story and the situations. Let's see, and yeah, actually, I'll give a brief example. So I talked about how they act like a family. You have very early on, there's this thing where like Reed is like, I can't find this particular thing, and Sue is like, I know where it is if you'll just maybe just let me find it. And he's like, but I can't find it. That's a very like old married couple kind of thing. I mean, they're not like old, but yeah, married couple kind of thing. And it's a, I'm sure you already know, old married couple. That's a thing you say not about others than yeah. Anyway, I'm gonna move on. There's a thing about like at one point Johnny like starts eating cereal right before they eat dinner, and Ben is like, "What are you doing? We're sitting down for dinner, and you're chomping on." That felt like a real thing. It's not that there was so much silly pranking in I guess, okay, maybe I won't give away which one, but at least one of the other Fantastic Four movies, and it just felt like, what are you doing? Like, this is just like trying to appeal to listen, don't get me wrong, I can find pranks hilarious, but I just don't think it fit there. Let's see. Especially in fiction. I'm not as big a fan of pranks in real life. If you're going to prank someone in real life, make sure it's someone who will find it funny. Don't, like, make it at their expense, unless they're, like, a jerk or something. But yeah, it felt real, the way they talk to each other. Let's see, the cinematography and editing do a really solid job of letting the emotional beats really hit without trying to be like overly, a counter example would be something like Michael Bay, who's, maybe he's gotten better. Let's see, the last time I watched a Michael Bay movie was The Island, watched everything he made up to and including The Island. In those movies, if there was an emotional scene, he would tend to like move the camera too much and make it like you really feel it. And in this movie, it's more like just letting us feel it. There were times where the camera barely moved because what is on screen was so powerful that you don't need a lot. I really appreciate that. And at the same time, when there's adventure, the cinematography and editing really capture the scale and scope in just a really breathtaking way, This is definitely one you'll want to watch. If you're going to watch this all, watch it at least once in theaters. I get not wanting to support Disney. I'm not saying, obviously, if you simply find that morally abhorrent, I'm not telling you that you have to. But if you're going to watch it, definitely it's a movie that works really well on a big screen and with a crowd that shares your excitement. The production value is very high, and set design, costumes, and makeup are solid. They really capture this, let's see, I think they call it retrofuturistic 1960s look and vibe, and just, yeah, it's fantastic. I do agree with those. I've seen at least one critic say, why are you going to do that and then subdue the colors? And that is, that's another thing. That's another place where Superman tops this. I hope the MCU at some point, like, I don't know, is it just, is someone, like, did someone, like, lock that setting on every single piece of editing software they use? Why do they keep doing it? They do it even, because something like this really, the more vibrant colors would have improved it in a significant way. Let's see, and yeah, also just it feels like they actually do wear those blue and white suits like in the classic comics. They don't the blue is lighter and brighter than some of those other. I guess yeah, I actually think this might be the closest they are to the comics other than what I've seen of the 94 movie. You know, again, like, I get it's difficult to make it work, so maybe just wait until the audiences are ready for it. I get why in 2005, you know, we were still trying to recover from Batman and Robin, you know, which I maintain the problem with that movie was not that it was too comic booky, it's that it treated comic books as something for children and something to sell toys. You know, that was the major problem there. If you haven't watched Batman Forever in a while, that one also quite comic booky. It works a lot better than Batman and Robin, you know. Let's see, High Top Films did a video talking about, you know, Batman Forever, really expressing. I don't know that I'm myself am going to do a video on it, but he does a really good job talking about what really works about that movie, you know. But yeah, you know, one of the things about Batman and Robin that people could like point to and be like, that's bad, is the bright colors. And again, if the tone was just better for that, then the bright colors could absolutely have worked. They did in Superman 2025. Now, I think that might cover that. So yeah, the music is great. Some of it is very tense and like again, like underlining how big certain things are, how momentous certain things are. And at other times, yeah, there is that, you know, sense of like, we can do this, you know, hope kind of thing. And that's a major theme in this, which I really appreciated. Again, like Superman 2025. And honestly, in some ways, I, no, yeah, I would say in some ways even more so here, and certainly I really appreciate it. I don't know if they like knew how Superman 2025 was going to handle it, because I feel like these movies were probably filmed and edited around the same time, but this one explores it in a slightly different way that I thought really worked. I'm also not going to spoil Superman 2025 in this video. The sound design is great. This is one of those. There's a lot of visuals that require excellent sound design. You know, a lot of what we see was not there in reality. You know, it was made in a computer afterwards, and for that you need good sound design. You know, I've said it before, I'll say it again. If you don't believe me, test it for yourself. Watch a movie that you love that has significant special effects, mute, and see how much less of an impact the special effect has, you know. Yeah, the characters, I really appreciate. It's one of those things, when these characters, if they are one note, as they were in, you know, I think especially 2005 and 2007 versions, they're just unbearable, you know, because they're like, okay, we get it, you know, this is like, because it's on paper, if you don't flesh them out, they are kind of tropey and stereotypical. And it's one of those things where, like, in a way, they weren't that bad when they were first created, you know, but we've seen variations of it so many times over, you know, what is it now, 60 some, or maybe about 60 years. I forget which exact year in the 60s they made. Yeah, we've seen so many variations on this, and a lot of people don't even know this is the original, and also some people, for them, it just doesn't work. Watching, you know, a new adaptation of the original that doesn't take that kind of stuff into account. And here they do a really good job. There are several really smart decisions. Ben, you know, yes, they do have the element that, you know, he misses the way he used to look, but you know what? He also kind of gets a kick out of how kids like him. You know, he does like do the thing, and you know, he's very playful about it in the scene of, you know, the kids asking him to lift the car. Which, yeah, by the way, yeah, in case you're unaware, that's like nothing for him. That's like lifting a matchbox, essentially, you know. And you know, it's one of those things, like, the kids know he can do it, and they want to see it with their own two eyes. You know, it's like, if, you know, sometimes you'll have, like, let's see, I guess that's probably primarily with does it happen with sports people still, or otherwise maybe like a celebrity? You know, if they see someone, it's like, oh, you're the one who does the voice. Can you do the voice for me, please? And they'll do the voice, and the fan is like, amazing. You know, that was such a wonderful moment. You know, it's that sort of thing, and again, that's something the others didn't really capture. Let's see. Johnny can be rash, but he is also smart. Like, it's when you watch some of the others, it's like, I'm sorry, are we still, like, you said they went to space, so they're astronauts. Like, why is Johnny behaving like a bro? Like, he's acting like this obnoxious frat douche on spring break. You know, what is this? What am I watching right now? You know, and yeah, here, yeah, he's, he likes to flirt, for example, but he is also, my boy's wicked smart, and that is something that, yeah, it's a great element, and it's something you need in a story like this. I forget how smart he is in the comics. Definitely they make a big thing in at least some of the comics, some of the older comics especially, maybe, of him being a hothead, pun very much intended. But yeah, it's in part also just if he's going to be a big part of this movie, and he is, yeah, we need him to be smart. We need him to have more than that. And that, again, major flaw with the 2005, 2007 ones. Let's see. Yeah, all four of them are smart and really contribute. They feel like a team. It's also one of those things of like, why would they still hang out together? Like, okay, I get that they have superpowers, and, like in the 2005 one, there's some stuff about, oh, we gotta understand the superpowers. So yeah, they spend some time together, but it is like, some of these people feel like they can't stand each other. Like, they don't want to be on the same planet, let alone the same building as each other. Why not? Like, I get, oh, superheroes, and can't you find someone else that's like smarter and more interested in superheroics, maybe, and yeah, here they really get that. The acting is phenomenal. Like, I know some people are frustrated that he's in frickin' everything, but, Joseph Quinn, I'm kidding, Pedro Pascal, there's a reason he's in everything. He's incredibly talented, and, like, I think this is the first thing I've seen him in where he really projects a immense level of intelligence. The other ones I've seen him in are The Mandalorian, where he's amazing, and Wonder Woman 2, a movie where fairly few come out looking particularly good. Honestly, at this point, I don't even remember if I thought he came out looking particularly good. And I did technically watch that movie twice, although the second time it was with riff tracks. Anyway, I think, yeah, just, and he captures, like, something that that's a spoiler. So what I'll say is there's something that Pedro Pascal excels at that he does here, and I'm glad they did it, because it really adds to the overall, yeah. Vanessa Kirby, it's, there's so many positive things to say about her. It's difficult to get all of just the love and immense wit of her are really something to behold. She's a very important character here. It's maybe especially the two of them that are asked to do the most, and they really nail it. I also thought there were a couple of characters that I wasn't sure how much they were going to get, and they got a good amount. I think that's all I will say about that. Yeah, this is the first thing I see Joseph Quinn in. Fantastic. I think they got it exactly right. He's not obnoxious. He is playful, and you can understand why some of the others find him irritating some of the time. But it's also like, you never feel like, why are they living with him? He's unbearable. Kick him out. Call him when you need him, but don't live with him, please. This is not good for you, Yeah, he's nowhere near as bad. He's almost like this, he can be a little annoying, like maybe insistent, like when he really wants something, he's like, you gotta hear me out on this, but he's not, a prankster nonstop, for example. I think that might just about, yeah. So Julia Garner, fantastic. Um, I think I will just briefly note there is at least one character in this that has to where the actor has to act through CG, and it's one of those things where it can be difficult, but for actor and animators alike. And here they do a solid job. I won't give away how many, but every single character in this, where the actor is acting through CG, I thought they did a fantastic job. Like, nuances come through, and that's something that used to be very difficult. It used to be essentially impossible if you go back far enough with CG and such. The MCU has a pretty good track record of it. I don't think it's ever been quite as good as it is here. Yeah. Ebon Moss-Bachrach and Natasha Lyonne, like, such immense talent that maybe they feel a little bit wasted here, maybe more than a little bit, especially Lyonne. I don't even know why, like, Lyonne, they had her do such amazing work elsewhere in the MCU, so I don't know why they gave her this kind of thankless role. I mean, best I can figure is they're gonna do more down the line, but I don't think it had to be so little here. Eben, he's amazing, I would watch him read the phone book, especially if there was sound on. But yeah, they don't really challenge him all that much here. And again, I think they're going to do it down the line. I do not think, for one thing, he doesn't seem like someone who would agree to a role just because it's like, oh, it's going to get me a lot of attention, if he doesn't think that there's meat on the bone. So I think they told him, don't worry, down the line we're going to do more. Now, I think that pretty well. Yeah. The pacing is really solid. Considering, like I said, it kind of opens on montage stuff. Yeah, and yeah, the special effects are amazing. It's very much one of the ones where, there are sequences with a ton of CG, and if it was not convincing, the scene would fall flat on its face. And some of these scenes go on for a little bit, so yeah, it's I really appreciate that. I'm afraid they probably still underpaid and overworked the artists. Yeah, that's something I really do hope at some point they will do better on. But hoping large corporations do the right thing is, yeah, we got to put more pressure on them, I guess is what I'm trying to get at. The action is phenomenal. I was deeply immersed every step of the way. Yeah, they did a really good job on making certain scenes genuinely, like, I did not know how they were going to end some of these. Like, I some of the time I was like, okay, this is probably where this is going, but then something happened, I was like, oh, wow, how is this going to be resolved? And I was always satisfied with the resolution. It never felt like a cop-out, which, sometimes when you have a situation like that, it can feel like, yeah, I think, the comedy, as with other MCU, can be hit and miss, but like I mentioned, it doesn't tend to undermine the serious stuff, which makes it a lot easier to take in. And yeah, like, it tends to be there when there's been a little bit where something was sad, and the sadness gets to land, and then there's like some comic relief to not make it, become like grimdark or something. Let's see. Yeah, there's some stuff that's genuinely scary in this, which I quite appreciated. And the sci-fi and fantasy elements, I absolutely loved. I'll discuss them in detail in the spoiler section, but yeah, just, that's again something I've read enough Fantastic Four books to have been very disappointed by that aspect of the other films and very satisfied by the one here. Yeah, so it does push the PG-13 some, not as much as other MCU. I did appreciate, like, it's a movie that easily could be more violent than it is, PG-13 violent. And I thought they did it was smart of them to hold back. Again, it's, meant to inspire hope and optimism and not wallow in the sadness that right now it's, there's a lot of sad stuff going on right now. Free Palestine, screw Trump. I hope Putin is prevented from trying to invade Ukraine soon. So, there is a mid-credits and a post-credits here. The post-credits you don't need to see. I didn't mind it. I did like it, but it's not like something you have to see. You're not going to be like lost in one of the future MCU projects if you miss it. The mid-credit scene, you're really going to want to make sure to see. Yeah, a lot of the way this is a very left-leaning movie. I think I might discuss how in the spoiler sections, because some of this stuff happens fairly late in the movie, and I'm glad I didn't know it before going in, so I don't want to ruin that for you. Let's see. I think that does get us. Is that right? I guess that's right. Let's see. I think that might just about bring us to the yeah. Yes, I think this is a... There we go. Yeah, so my full ranking of every single MCU feature film... right, okay, I put a couple of other things in there. If it's like a standalone thing, if it's not an episode of a thing. Yeah, full ranking, worst to best, and, there's something I love about all of them. The very bottom ones, I will acknowledge, have some issues. That's why they're down there. But yeah, overall, I do love all of these movies, just not quite equally. I'm ranking how much I love them, not whether or not I love them all. Yeah, Iron Man 2, Dark World, Black Widow, Captain America 1, Thor 1, Ragnarok, Hulk, Ant-Man 1, Ant-Man 2, The Marvels, Love and Thunder, Homecoming, Doctor Strange 1, Iron Man 3, Iron Man 1, The Avengers 1, Ultron, Ant-Man 3, Madness, Far From Home, No Way Home, Guardians of the Galaxy Holiday Special, Captain America 4, Thunderbolts, Fantastic Four, First Steps, Guardians of the Galaxy 1, 2, Black Panther, Winter Soldier, Werewolf, Deadpool 3, Shang-Chi, Eternals, Guardians 3, Wakanda Forever, Civil War, Infinity War, and Endgame. And yeah, overall, this is an 8. Fantastic team members working together to inspire hope and save the day whilst letting us actually sit with some heavy stuff out of 10. And that brings us to the thoughts section. So, let's see, I'm going to make sure that the, if it's willing to save. So I'm going to, so I'm being asked to fill 30 seconds of time. Now the person is being kind of insistent about it, which is too bad because she's usually nice. And that's 30 seconds. Should I stop referencing Sports Night? It's just so wonderfully quippy, but I do appreciate that, for as far left as I am, there's definitely some Aaron Sorkin stuff where it's like, okay, come on, man, what is this little crap? yeah, let's see. So the I think that pretty well gets us. Yeah. I really loved how this, like, okay, you know what? Before I get into it, if you feel like what I'm about to say is reading too much into it, okay, maybe. I accept that that's potentially what's going on. Anyway, to me, I already mentioned that it felt like, Fauci, part of that was the fact that, yeah, at first it's like, oh, we really appreciate you. You're making the world a better place. You're saving lives. And then, some bad news comes out and suddenly people turn on them because, like, it's not a one-to-one because it wasn't like Fauci, did something that a lot of people perceived as selfish. It's more that conservatives managed to control the narrative, and as usual, as they do way too often, and as per usual, when they do that, they lied and made things that could have been okay pretty terrible, because that's what they do. That's what the ideology is gravitating towards in recent decades, and that's something that the people who currently believe in it could choose to stop. You can make a new branch of conservatism that isn't ridiculous, Like, I'm not saying you have to be as far left as I am. I know that's not going to happen for many conservatives. That will never ever happen. But you don't have to be this. And I do appreciate that is something I will say. I'm glad to see a bunch of people, basically choosing, to accept that something's fishy about the Epstein thing rather than continuing to believe in MAGA whilst Trump is saying, don't believe the Epstein thing. Basically, like, yeah, it was a test of loyalty for a cult. As I'm sometimes so bad at remembering channel names. I really mean no disrespect. Yeah, I don't think I'm going to be able to. Non-compete, made a video recently pointing that out. Anyway, let's see. Then we have the, yeah, it felt a lot like Fauci to me, and I do also want to appreciate, not everyone turned on Fauci, thankfully. And I suppose I don't know if everyone turned on the Fantastic Four, but enough, and that's part of what I mean here. That's part of how it's applicable. Other than that, yeah, I gotta say, there's a couple of things. So let's see, Shalabal, refers to Galactus as unstoppable, a force of nature. And then you have a thing about, a smart person realizes, oh, there's a solution to this, but we're all going to have to work together. There's going to have to be some sacrifices made. Electricity is part of it. Yeah, look, sue me. Maybe I'm over analyzing. I think it's about climate change. And I love the sense of optimism. And, ultimately it turns out, like Silver Surfer is able to, I think I might go back and forth between which I refer to it as, but yeah, Shalabal destroys most of the teleporters. Maybe she watched The Fly. And look, I'm just saying, if they open that little chicken egg that they keep teleporting back and forth, you're not going to like what you see in there. Might end up in the deleted scene, in fact. How out there is it that Mel Brooks helped get that movie made? Like, that, he really gave us a lot of, he's responsible for some amazing moments in cinema, His own movies are not necessarily like high art, but he was trying to say something with several of them, and I think it was important things to say, but I could go on about that forever. I think Lindsay Ellis has said it better than I could, so we're gonna move on. But yeah, she manages to destroy most of them, but there's still one left, and with that one, they are able to deal with Galactus, and they do say, we can't stop it permanently. We can't like destroy or kill, but we can set it back by a long time. And that is essentially like, yeah, I mean, eventually, the planet is going to, but it's so far out in the future. If we are able to significantly lessen the negative effects of climate change, which, like I say, is going to take a lot of working together, different countries working together, all over the world, having hope, having, a sincere belief in making things better, and going to require sacrifices, including related to electricity and yeah, I guess I've made my point about that. I think that pretty well gets us to, let's see. Yeah. Right, yes. I know what I was going to say about, yeah, the fact that by the end, even though they lost a lot of these, which I'm sorry, to me, the teleporters are equivalent to, I guess, not only windmills, but in part windmills. I am not the right person to ask about what exactly, there's so much is happening. Please look elsewhere for like up-to-date stuff. It's wonderful. I am so, it fills me with hope and, hope for the future, faith in common humanity, the decency that we all have within us and can choose to embrace or reject and become conservative. But yeah, the fact that even though there was only one machine left, it was still significant. They did still manage to, and also just the fact that, yeah, Galactus, once he's on Earth, yeah, he's not like, oh, I'm going to smash this building kind of thing, It's not like a kaiju thing or something. He just kind of doesn't really, he barely notices that they're there, and he like leans on one like it's nothing, Yeah, that's like how climate change is not like this evil force, And again, look, maybe I'm reading into it. Feel free to fill the comment section with you're reading too much into it. Spanned over and over. But the fact that they are like, okay, so this area is going to be dangerous for people to stay in, we should evacuate, and then they have to make like an agreement with someone who like, so it's not quite another country, but it's not that far off with, Mole Man, Harvey, sorry. And yeah, that again sounds like climate change to me, and that is something we're going to have to deal with, climate refugees. And the sooner we get to it, the less innocent people are going to die just because selfish people don't want to deal with, like, listen, we are all human beings. We share this planet. We can all contribute, or we can, like, build walls and keep people out who could make society better. Like, at the same time as they're, like, literally, deporting thousands of hard-working people who, like, happen to not be in the country legally. And I feel like I've heard at least some, I feel like I've heard of at least some people who technically are citizens, but, like, they were just mistaken for, because, like, I don't know, they're brown, and without due process, how do you know if someone's a legal immigrant or not? But, the Gestapo, I'm sorry, ICE, as if there's a difference at this point, going around, hiding their faces like the cowards they are, little piss pants babies, covering their ID, which shouldn't be legal. How are you going to hold someone accountable? Pulling guns on people filming what they're doing, even though supposedly what they're doing is legal and just. Like, I'm sorry, I sometimes don't want to be filmed. It's never been when what I'm doing is, like, something that I think I should be proud of. Like, I don't know, don't stick a camera in my toilet is, I guess, all I'm saying. But, if I'm, like, helping an old lady cross the street and I see someone filming that, I'm not gonna, pull a gun on them. And that's not only because I don't own one and never will, never have, but yeah, I just think it's very telling. That's kind of like, wasn't that what conservatives used to say? Only criminals would do that. What do they have to hide? That's what they would have, remember the whole Patriot Act, quote unquote debate where conservatives were just screaming, well, what do you have to hide? So you're a terrorist? Is that what you're admitting here? You know, and now they're like, oh, but I didn't think the leopards would eat my face. Let's see. I think that does pretty well cover those major themes. So I thought they did a really solid job on giving just enough character to Shalabal and uh, uh, Galactus. You know, I wasn't sure if they were going to have that because there are stories where Galactus speaks. There are stories where he doesn't really speak, or at least not like in front of us very much. You know, right? I can't believe how did I forget up to this point? Galactus and no, actually, this is a good place to put it. Galactus and Fantastic Four. Some of my favorite comic book stories are them fighting each other. There's this awesome one with like time travel, and they keep having to try over and over again to stop Galactus and trying different things to make it work. Like that sort of like to time loop kind of logic thing. You know, wonderful stuff. You know, so yeah, I've been waiting for a good Fantastic Four story for 25 years. That's not an exaggeration. I started reading comics in 1999. Some of the earliest ones were Fantastic Four, and immediately I was like, holy crap. And then the movies came out, and it was like, holy crap. But I don't know. Maybe that's unfair. It's probably more right to say unholy crap for the movies. But yeah, I thought they did, because it's one of those things, like Galactus, you essentially don't need, because he's the force of nature, you know? But to have it be this personal thing where he's like, you know, at first he's like, I just want to get rid of this pain, this hunger. It's driving me, you know, I can't stand it anymore. But there near the end, he's like, you're going to pay. I'm going to, you know, what was it, the thing about, you know, I'm going to eat your planet slowly and your child will watch, you know, that, oh, maybe that wasn't near the end, but whatever, you know, that was one thing he said. And yeah, at that point, we're like, okay, you're going down, you know, and yeah, I thought that was a smart thing to do. And again, not how they, right, did I mention at this point in the video, I will be spoiling not only this movie, but also the 3 theatrically released Fantastic Four live-action movies that came out before this one. You know, yeah, the 2007 movie, you know, yeah, no personality. And I get, again, like I just said, force of nature, I get it. 100% I get it. But if you're gonna do a character like Galactus, don't turn him into a frickin' cloud. Like, what are you doing? What is this? You know, just like... And yes, I did notice the silhouette. It's not nothing, but it's extremely close, though. Yeah, you know, just maybe don't do a character like that. There's so many other Fantastic Four characters. I'll grant that he's one of the biggest ones, you know, but yeah. Right, I guess I'll just briefly say, so we barely know anything about Dr. Doom, just he refused to be part of the Foundation. You know, Latveria seat is empty. But and he shows up in the mid-credit scene. We don't even see his face. I do think that is a strong introduction to him because, like, yeah, if you don't know anything about Doctor Doom, yeah, he's not above. I forget if in the comics I think he might have gone after Franklin, but he certainly isn't above kidnapping a 4-year-old to steal their power. You know, so yeah, that's a pretty definitive. Like, holy crap, he is just. You know, he's willing to do incredibly evil things to reach his ends. Let's see. I think that might be about what I wanted to say about Galactus. I think I'm gonna try to do some chronological stuff. So yeah, the opening montage. You know, love that they have the big creature. You know, that's. I forget if it's the first, but it's one of the first. I'm almost sure, and it's a very famous, you know, cover image. Yeah, they recreate it. You know, that cover image. I actually forget at this point if it is in the comic, but I have read that comic. You know, 25 years ago. Not sure I've read it any time since then, sadly. But yeah, you know, it's telling the audience, yes, we know the comics, we love these comics. Now, please bear with us as we do change some things, you know. And I was willing to, and I thought their changes largely worked. But yeah, the opening with, you know, right, the stretching looks so fantastic. Oh, right, I meant to say in the review itself, you know, a good amount of superpower use and creative superpower use. You know, I think I'm gonna just briefly add it to the, so superpower use, creative, right amount. There we go. Yes, so yeah, the stretching looks so freaking good. I was never entirely sure why people were so doubtful. You know, people were like, "Oh, why can't we see the stretching? Why don't we get to see the stretching?" You know, you know, okay. One thing I will say, I don't love turning, you know, Ms. Marvel's powers into hard light instead of stretching. That I 100% did. That felt, because it's just, it's an important part of that character, because it's her goofy personality comes through, and that, you know, she'll stretch her arm out and you know, punch or grab or that sort of thing. That, you know, that's part of who she is. That's like how, you know, the Johnny Storm, you know, because, you know, has fire all over his body because there's fire within him. You know, he can't stand still, kind of thing. You know. But yeah, other, you know, for a while people were saying, why don't we get to see the powers, you know, the stretching in trailers and such, and you know, I'm not the first person to say it, but maybe they didn't want to give it away, maybe the effects weren't fully to their satisfaction. I genuinely don't know why people were so worried that it was going to look bad, because stuff like that rarely looks bad in the MCU. I'm not claiming that there's never like bad effects, but just, yeah, I don't know. I'm gonna move on now. I also feel like sometimes, at least sometimes, when there's bad effects, it's because it's something that they didn't really seem to care that much about, and I felt like it was clear from the beginning. No, they've been, listen, they've been wanting to do Fantastic Four for so many years, and then finally they got the rights to, and like, yeah, you know, clearly this was a labor of love from start to finish. Of course they were going to make sure that something as important as the stretching looks good. And yeah, it looks so much better than the other versions, you know, which, listen, for, you know, the 2005 one was probably made a little too early in the, you know, development cycle of CG. CG just didn't look super good back then, especially stuff like that, because we know what stretching looks like, you know? It's like with fire and faces and such, we can pretty quickly tell if something's off. And the 2015 one, was it a budget issue? I don't even remember. That movie was such a mess. Anyway, but yeah, you know, all of them using their powers, I like. It's a hokey image, but it works. Johnny Storm stopping a fire faster than the firefighters could, because he like absorbs all the fire, and then we see the firefighters salute him, and then he salutes them back. I'm sorry, sue me. Sometimes I can be corny. That's perfect. That's one of the things we want from stories like this. You know, I'm not saying every superhero has to, or every comic book adaptation, whatever, has to do this. I'm just saying some of them do, and the Fantastic Four, like, they are so hopeful and optimistic, you know. So, yeah. Let's see. I think that pretty well brings us to. Let's see. I think I will just briefly note, yeah, Natasha Lyonne, I really do hope they do use her more, because she is great. She's always great. This is an actress that I've been a fan of for 25 years, and I keep not watching. I gotta watch some of her more recent stuff. I don't know why. I think some of it is like on streaming services that I don't have access to. I could have access to, but right now I really don't want to pay for more than one, you know? Anyway, yeah, she's amazing, you know? Yeah. Let's see. I think it was an interesting decision to set this on Earth. It's, you know, 828. Like, I was never entirely sure how they were gonna explain, you know, because it's one of those things like, if they were there in the 60s, why aren't they there now? And I kind of figured that they were gonna like disappear into a time travel warp thing, and it seemed like, you know, maybe that's what it's about to happen there at the end. You know, maybe they go in instead of Galactus or something. but or they go in, but they get sent to a different place than Galactus, or something like that. And we already saw Thunderbolts. Yeah, the ship is there in the present day, but maybe the idea is supposed to be that 4828 present day is the 1960s. I don't really know what exactly, but I'm not saying it's a problem. I'm sure they have, they can do it within minutes. Like maybe let's say I think Avengers 5. I'm afraid I don't really. Let's see. One of them is called Doomsday, but I don't remember if that's 5 or 6. But Avengers 5, maybe within the first few minutes, they get sucked into something, and then their ship, yeah, they're in a ship, they're in the ship, they get sucked in. Then we have the post-credit scene from Thunderbolts. That works. Let's see. I think that might. I do have to wonder, since the first thing we see of Doctor Doom in the MCU is him with Franklin, is it gonna be that he's going to like kidnap and then they have to rescue him in the in Avengers 5? Maybe I'm not entirely sure. I do think that could work hypothetically. Let's see. I think that does pretty well. And right, I do really appreciate. I'm looking forward to a Doom that is actually the leader of, dictator, leader of Latveria, kind of thing. Anyway, I think that might just about get us to, yeah, I thought they did a good job, very early on, just having, just establishing their personalities. The thing about, where's the iodine? You're looking in the wrong place. Give me 12 seconds, I'll find it. That's very specific, which is just such a wonderful, like, listen, I have a lot of faith in us men. I think we can do wonderful things. Just a lot of the time we don't, because patriarchy has told us that we don't need to try hard for certain things. I'm not saying for all. And yeah, it's just like, what are you doing? Like, just let her do it for you. But some men just cannot accept help from a woman, even when they trust. But yeah, she immediately finds the iodine. I do think that was less than 12 seconds, but yeah, I guess maybe she was counting her like standing up and walking into the room. Maybe that was 12 seconds total, but yeah, she slides over the iodine, and then pregnancy test that says she is indeed pregnant. I don't know how that's going to help his shoulder, but yeah, and then you're late. What do you mean? You're late for dinner? And Ben, you just see the look on his face, and it's such a great, because like I've seen Eben Moss-Backrack, wonderful actor. So glad that he's doing these, and it's so cool that we actually have Ben Grimm, Jewish character, created by Jewish artists, actually played by a Jewish actor. That's such a great, like, it's about frickin' time, But the yeah. Then we have the, let's see. Yeah, you see the look on his face, and yeah, I've watched enough Eben to, I could easily see Eben through the Thing CG, but yeah, the Thing, Shalabal, Galactus, all three, acting through CG, and you can still see, like, think about how much less, not little, but how much less effect Galactus would have had if we heard the words, but the face didn't fully match or something. But yeah, there's enough there. Yeah, he immediately like, you're pregnant, aren't you? And I really appreciate they don't do the thing, no, and then they spend several scenes, and then eventually he's like, I knew you were pregnant, I just had to find proof. No, it's just like, she comes out and she says it, and she's happy, and they're all happy, and we don't have that, I'm so sick of that trope of like, because you could so easily have like, a worse version of this would have Johnny be like, but what about me? Are you not gonna love me as much because I'm only your brother and now you have a baby? And it's just like, no, stop. Nobody wants this. Who wants this? Nobody. I've asked everyone on the planet. It took me a while, but everybody said no. A lot of them asked, who are you and why are you in my room? But the teleportation, that's how I got around. But the, yeah, obviously I'm exaggerating. I'm sure some people still love that trope, but I am glad I don't need to see it ever again. I think we got more than enough of it. There were years where they would always do that. And listen, I get that for some people that is how they feel. But sometimes a better way is to show, you could just be supportive, because it is clear they do still love him. They don't need to say, oh, will they still love him, because we see it, and that is like, in reality, so often, I suppose not always, sadly there are some where that's not the case, but a lot of the time, yes, you are still loved even though you're not the main, they might for a while spend more time on the baby because it's a baby, it has a lot of needs to be met, but you are still loved, and yeah, the fact that he's supportive and like, yeah, everyone is just trying to make it, yeah. Uh, I was, so for a while, we get a fake baby that is like, it's, we gotta try to avoid things like that. I hear that it bothered a lot of people who chose to watch American Sniper. I don't know why they chose to watch that. I thought it was pretty obvious that it was going to be like kind of worshipping of someone that we at the time already knew not a super good guy, so why is he being celebrated here? But, the fake baby was what some people cared more about. And I do appreciate, like, from what I understand, it was an extremely obviously fake baby, distractingly so. And yeah, when this baby was CG, and I appreciate sometimes it had to be, and maybe they didn't have enough time to fully finish the effects. And again, it's difficult, but yeah, for example, when like there are times where Ben is holding the baby, and it's like, I guess it kind of has to be fake, right? Because like in reality, that's Eben Moss Backrack wearing a suit that is not as bulky as what he ends up looking like. So if Eben was holding the baby, it would look weird. He would like phase into the arm of the thing. So I get why. Still frustrating, it was like some of the time the face was like Matrix Reloaded, Neo animated face bad, and that's not something we want to go back to. Let's see, I think but yeah, a lot of the time it is a real baby and they did a really good job, and yeah, I care deeply, I care a lot about this baby, and yeah, Franklin. Let's see. Okay, I think I'm gonna try to do some more chronological stuff. So yeah, you have this thing of like, they're like being celebrated, and right. I love that Sue in this. Okay, so we still have. There is. I would argue it is important if you're going to do Sue Storm's character justice. Yes, there does need to be some focus on feminine aspects of her character. You can't just have her act like, sort of neutral or like a man, even though, some people would say, oh, but that's more empowering for women. I respect that opinion, especially if it's coming from women, but I do lean towards the women that say, the female feminists that say, no, there's nothing wrong with being a woman. There's some really amazing things about being a woman. Let's have that in media. And yeah, this Sue Storm is still feminine, but she's not obsessing over her wedding and thinking that's more important than saving the world like in the 2007 version. She's focused on her baby. And that's, that is one area where, across the political aisle, we can agree, a lot of women care deeply about their babies. And, again, this is one area where there's agreement. There's, a lot of us agree. That's a wonderful thing. It's such a, that's again, it's so life affirming that there are, so many women out there who, to be clear, I'm not saying they have to, I don't think anybody should feel like they have to have a baby. You should have a baby if you feel ready for it, if you think it's right, if you think that you can be an amazing parent, but yeah, it's a thing where, yeah, and also in part because like at the end of the day, so I don't want to downplay how important weddings are. For a lot of people, it is like, the happiest day of their lives, at least up to that point. And for a lot of women, it is this thing of like, now you're guaranteed that life will work out. And obviously that's something all of us want. You know, everybody wants to feel like our life is going to go in a good direction, you know? So I hate when people are like, ah, women care so much about weddings. Yeah, because that's like, so many of the people who say that are conservatives who don't want women to work, and they don't want a woman to be with more than one man. And a wedding is kind of saying, you know, she's not necessarily going to have to work, and she's not going to be with more than one man. So what's your problem? Oh, right, bigotry, brain rot. You just hate women, and nothing they say or do will ever be good enough for you. So we really should stop listening to you when it comes to, well, I guess anything really, but especially like relationships and women and such. But yeah, I really appreciate it that they have that in here. And also, she does get to be like career oriented. You know, she starts the foundation. She's dealing with, you know, a lot of people and making the world a better place. You know, that's the kind of thing we love to see when women are able to. And so much of the time when women are not able to, it's because men are holding them back. And sometimes it is sadly other women holding them back, but yeah, it's usually that they're being held back instead of them not having the qualities required for it, you know? And occasionally it's because, you know, they could have those qualities, but they didn't. Those qualities were not nurtured when they were younger, and you know, yeah, patriarchy sucks. Let's see. I think that does pretty well cover. I think that does pretty well get us to. Let's see. Yeah. So the alarm goes. You know, there's the thing about, oh, we keep getting these readings from space. Well, save it to save it to a record. Wonderful. You know, like we can perceive, you know, signals in languages we don't even understand from outer space, but let's put it on an LP so we can listen to it with one of those players. Just fantastic. You know, this is something I love about comic books, and a lot of us do. This mix of the futuristic and something we have today, that, you know, because like in the 60s they would have had, I forget if they did have something exactly like that, but they certainly would have if they hadn't, literally. And you know, 60 years later make a movie, yeah, where it says, oh, you know, this is what they would do, so it's what they're going to do in our movie too. I think that does bring us to, but yeah, you know, so they want to go to space. And so they do. And the thing about the suits, and it was like, come on, please just fix the suits. Look, they're dusty. You haven't done anything with these in 2 years. And, you know, yeah. So then he makes the suits, and Johnny's actually grateful. You know, he doesn't just make a smart alecky comment and then nothing. No, he actually thanks him. And apologizes for things he says out loud to himself in private, which, yeah, it's one of those apologies where it's like, you know what, TMI. Let's see. I think that does bring it. So yeah, they go to space, complete with the FTL device and everything. And it's the Excelsior. Love it, absolutely. Ugh. I miss Stan Lee. And right, I also really appreciate, you know, yeah, the movie. I guess the movie has more of a tribute. Well, it has that tribute to Stan Lee, but other than that, like, yeah, there at the end we have an actual quote from Jack Kirby, and you know, it points out, yeah, you know, 8/18, that was his birthday. You know, the 18th of August. That's why it's Earth 8/18. Fantastic, and it's a great quote. You know, and he gave us so much. It's and was not always treated as well as he should be. I think that does get us to, so yeah, I think before I cover space, I will briefly talk about, so Disney owns MCU and Star Wars, and in Star Wars they are not doing that good of a job outside of a little bit of recent stuff, which is wonderful, but not enough in my opinion, and hopefully they're going to do more from now on. to actually treat robots well. If you haven't already watched, I want to say it's called The Tragedy of Droids in Star Wars by the Pop Culture Detective, who in general makes amazing videos. Yeah, you have so so far we haven't had a huge number of robots in the MCU. Some of them have been treated poorly, like Dummy, for example. With Herbie, I feel like it's a little bit mixed because in some ways he is treated as a member of the family. Like, there was a little while where I was thinking, oh, they kind of treat him like a pet, don't they? But then, like, they put him in charge of babysitting, or is it babysitting if you're, is he so much part of the family that it's not technically babysitting? He's in charge of the baby, that's not nothing. Like a lot of people would say, hire a person for that, maybe, but no, they, and Herbie even, it puts up the shield over the building to protect the baby. So there's a lot, that's again not, yeah. But they do also yell at him every single time that the baby proofing annoys them. And then he like runs away scared. I feel like they're definitely trying to do a little bit of an R2-D2 with him, a BB-8 kind of thing, where, a little bit of mischief, but means well and that sort of thing. But I don't know. I'm not sure I come down hard on either side of it. I think I'm gonna wait. I can imagine others will do a thorough analysis of how he's treated. I'm not always the best at talking about things like that, analyzing it well. But yeah, I think that is, and hopefully, if it is ultimately not good enough, hopefully they can do better in future installments. But yeah, they bring him into the rocket and they take out one of the tapes and it says like home, and then the other one, they put it in. It's like space. Anyway, yeah, they fly to where Galactus is. And at first, it's like, why is what's the deal with that planet? And then it's like eaten, and it's like, yeah, very very cool. And I think, yeah. So also the thing about Shala Bal, the thing with yeah, she talked to me. She talked to all of us, Johnny. That's a very MCU joke. But yeah, the thing about, she said something in her own language, and then he uses that. He makes a Rosetta Stone. See, he can make references to smart stuff too, and he actually does. He helps save the day. And yeah, at first it does seem like, oh, someone's got a crush, but no, he does genuinely. It seems like it because he has this kind of youthful exuberance. So sometimes it's like, oh, he's got something stuck in his head again, But no, he realized there's something here, and he worked on it, and he was able to talk her out of helping Galactus, so that was great. A great element at least. But yeah, so they go there, and she shows up and she's like, you shouldn't have come here. Well, thanks for telling us now. But yeah, I'm joking. Obviously, she made it pretty clear that this probably wouldn't be a good idea. Anyway, but yeah, I thought they did an amazing job on how freaking massive. Sometimes I freaking hate this chair. There we go. Thank you. Too many legs. And I'm not gonna start pulling them off and seeing if it can still walk. Even if the Lord and Savior of that religion, it's a little iffy if he's real or not, and that's an interesting element of that book. But yeah, he's dude's massive. What a unit. And yeah, the talking about it, and the thing with the baby. Others have already made the meme with the second Austin Powers movie, so I'm not gonna go there. Man, that was a really fat phobic joke. I'm glad I'm seeing less of that in more recent stuff. That's even stuff that's very like edgy in other ways. Anyway, I think that does bring us to the Yeah, the thing about, he starts, he makes her go into labor, and the thing, I think it's Shalabal who says if he was old enough, he would do it himself, and the reason you don't know that he has powers is because he's hiding it from you, which, yeah, I've read some stories about Franklin Richards. Yeah, he can do stuff. He can do significantly more than we see in this movie, and I'm thinking he will in some of the... Because that actually is the thing. Like, it could help explain something that we've heard might be in Avengers 5. For sure, Franklin has the power to do it in the comics. And, like, by age 4, he might be able to use them, especially if guided to by Doom. So, yeah. It was also great because, like, we see, the mid-credit scene, we see, like, even just from the green hood, like, okay, that's probably Doom, but we also see the mask. And he's taking it off because if Franklin just sees his face, even if it might be messed up, because at least some of the comics it is, that might still be less, like, but if he just sees this steel mask with the eyes, yeah, he might be kind of put off, I think that might just about cover. And yeah, I appreciate we didn't see his face because I don't. I hope they don't show it in the trailers. I don't want to know what his face looks like until I want it to be like a reveal, like a powerful reveal. Like, there's maybe a fight and someone manages to rip the mask off and we see, like, because in recent years they've pushed, like, I want his face to be more messed up than the worst of what we saw on the High Evolutionary. I want that level. Right, I guess I'll just also say, yeah, obviously Herbie and Franklin, part of it is, they're adorable. But it is also, Herbie's inclusion is also one of those things where it makes it clear, yeah, they're doing comic booky stuff. They're doing more, like, light stuff. Herbie was introduced in the anime, the Saturday morning cartoon. He's a Saturday morning cartoon sidekick character. And now he's in this major movie that's saying, yeah, and he was in a bunch of, like, marketing. They're saying, yes, we are doing, like, comic book, don't worry, and this is also, I feel bad that Peyton Reed didn't get to direct this, but I do get him being exhausted after, 3 Ant-Man movies, and at least Quantumania did get to be, it felt a lot like a Fantastic Four. The whole thing, they're going to a place that they never thought they'd actually, and we never thought they'd go to, and they get involved in this, like, conflict that they had no idea was going on. That very comic booky and not exclusive to Fantastic Four, but it's very Fantastic Four-y. Yeah, let's see. I think might just about bring us to the, yeah, the fact that so much of this is about the baby. I thought, like, I ended up not revealing it in the spoiler-free review, and I'm glad I didn't know, because, like, yeah, okay, we knew, that's also a thing. I don't know if they should, sometimes these marketing, I hope they get better at this. I don't think they should have revealed Franklin maybe at all, and I don't, yeah, we knew from marketing, that's how the meme was out before the movie was, we knew Galactus wants the baby. And I think that would have been, I know, sometimes I need to be more assertive. I know would have been so much more effective if we had no idea about that before. Like, imagine, like, everyone in the audience in the theater would have been like, what? When the baby is said to be, yeah, they want the baby, and they want, or he wants, Galactus wants the baby, and wants to turn it into a monster that devours all, like, holy crap, And yeah, it is noteworthy, I don't think Shia LaBeouf is lying. I think she can tell, yeah, Franklin, if he was old enough to, if he wasn't a baby, he would agree to this, because some of the stories I've read, Franklin is not always doing good. That's one of those things, like, you hope your child will do good, but children sometimes do something bad, it's a, yeah. And that doesn't make them, like, pure evil or something, obviously. But yeah, the fact that they spent a decent chunk of this movie talking about, this baby, and, like, even Reed says it's the ethical thing to do, and he says right after, no, I'm not saying we should do it, I'm just saying, I have to think about these things. And that was also, I feel like they're setting up, because he's like, I have to fill my head with the most awful ideas so that I can figure out a solution before someone hurts us, so I can stop them, and that is one of those things you have to be careful with thinking like that, but sometimes it is also necessary. Like, I've said it before, I'll say it again, it was definitely necessary to stop the Nazis, and some of the things that were done to stop the Nazis faster, like, it's not something that I would be, like, happy to participate in myself. But yeah, we needed to stop the Nazis, and I'm not making excuses for it. I'm not saying all of it was right, but yeah. But in the comics, sometimes Reed does something awful because he's always thinking about these variations and, could we do this? Should we do that? And I feel like they're building up. Maybe he'll even do it in one of the Avengers films, especially if Franklin is going to play a major role. Maybe he is going to do something that is like, holy crap, because like in the comics, he doesn't build Ultron, but he would have kind of, yeah. I think that does, but yeah, I thought it really worked. That so much of it is about the baby, and it's arguably, I guess it's maybe not, let's see, it's not a gamble because, like, ultimately, like, with some exceptions, I've heard that, okay, so I 100% support people who want to be child-free. I have heard, I've heard I've seen YouTubers read posts from, like, the Reddit, the subreddit for child-free, and apparently a bunch of people on there just hate children, like hate other people's children, and act like, why doesn't the child just behave in a way that, of course, the child isn't gonna behave like that. And I get, like, 100%, if you're, like, stuck on a plane or something, it can be obnoxious. But do also think about, if the child is acting out, it's probably because it's scared. It's a scary situation. I've been on planes. I didn't love it. I hope I was never, like, super impossible to be around. But in general, for a lot of my childhood, I was a fairly quiet child. I can never remember who, but someone referred to me as, like, Mouse when I was a kid. And that was pretty appropriate. Let's see. I did live in a little hole in the wall. What can I say? But yeah. Anyway, I'm not saying you have to have children. And I empathize with, I kind of feel bad for you if you just hate children, if you've genuinely never had a positive interaction with a child. Like, when I was younger, I'm, I don't socialize as much anymore. But when I was younger, yeah, when there was, like, a birthday in the family, I would socialize with the kids, and yeah, we had a lot of fun. I've had, when I was younger, not anytime recently, because at this point, I don't know, I feel like at a certain age, if you don't have a kid yourself, it gets weird to spend a lot of time around children, even if you are not, obviously I would never touch a child in an inappropriate way, but I also don't want anyone to, like, see me, like, around a child and, like, worry about that, because I would feel bad even if it wasn't true. I would feel like, no, please don't worry about me. I don't want you to have to think about things like that. We should do what we can to, in a progressive way. I can never remember what the ideal solution is for stuff like, sexual predators and such, but yeah, that. Anyway, yeah, children can be, yeah, fun to play with. They can make you see things in a new light and such. And anyway, a lot of us, perhaps the majority, think that babies are cute and we don't want any harm to come to them. So, in a way, it is perhaps not a gamble as such, but it is also not something that we usually see in movies like this. Like, I can imagine some people might leave this film and think, I kind of thought that there would be more like them going out and fighting crime. which, yeah, I guess at this point, they still don't have an awful lot of that in any of these, but at least this one does. Like, it just goes by fast, or is only, like, told about, stuff like that, but it is technically there, but yeah, a lot of it is the family stuff, which is extremely important, but family stuff doesn't always mean there's a baby there. But yeah, the fact that we spent so much time on this baby, and it is this sort of thing of like, well, there sure are a lot of people telling this woman, even before she gives birth, Galactus is like telling her what she should do with her baby. And then when the baby's born and they tell the world, hey, we're not going to give up our baby, and they do eventually say, we're not going to give up our baby, but we are going to save you still, And I appreciate that it was her giving that speech, because that's, again, something where, the men are like, why don't they like us? And she's like, listen, this is a communication problem. We just have to explain. Of course, we're still the heroes you love. We're not selfish. We're just gonna find another way. It's not the same thing. Saying that they won't solve it like that doesn't mean they're not gonna solve it, period. And sometimes really smart men can be bad at communicating. We are working on something, we just don't have it yet. They'll just say, well, I don't have a solution right now, and kind of expect others to realize that that means that they are working towards one. Sometimes scientists can be really bad at not screwing up the legs of my chair. Communication is what I'm getting at. Anyway, yes, I felt like that was super relevant in a post Roe v. Wade world. Post, yeah, the Roe v. Wade being, I can never remember what it's called, but a few years ago it was taken away, and yeah, Republicans are telling women, what they can and can't do with their baby, their body. Galactus stops just short of saying, your body, my choice, And it's, again, one of those things where sometimes we just need to see it in a movie. I really hope, we know that a lot of people are going to watch this. I hope that a lot of people see this and are like, oh, I didn't realize it's genuinely painful for someone to be told what to do about the baby they, their baby or their fetus or such, and yeah. And I do also think it's an interesting, because she did want the baby. It was just like a premature birth kind of thing. But yeah, that is also, sometimes they'll force the, because of these abortion laws. And, we had that one woman who was literally like brain dead, and they kept her body alive because now she's just an incubator, which, like, okay, I know some people are going to say, well, she doesn't care because she doesn't understand. Okay, but what about the family, though? Imagine seeing your daughter like that. How do you think that baby's going to feel when it grows up and realizes what happened to its mom? You think it's going to be happy that its mom was treated as an object like that? Just, I'm going to move on. Let's see. Then we have the yeah, like I said in the review, I thought it really worked to focus so much of it on that. And again, it is this thing of like hope for the future, because you have right there, yeah, hypothetically, in the short term, you could say, oh, but if we just give up our baby, this thing of like the future, and they said at the start, we tried for, what was it? They tried for a while, and it was like 2 years, and then suddenly she's pregnant, and yeah, I forget if that's the case in the comics, but I feel like maybe Franklin willed himself into existence, sort of, but yeah, let's see, I think that does pretty well get us to the, I thought it worked really well, this thing of like, essentially, I forget who exactly said it, but there was something about, we want Franklin to be even better than us, sort of thing. Or like, it was, no, it's like, he might be even more powerful than us. That might be it, And that's, again, like, ideally, if you are a parent, you want your baby, you want your offspring to be even better than you. That's how we make the world a better place. Every generation tries to do better, tries to improve things in their own way. And when you're old, you can look back on your offspring, maybe your grandkids and stuff like that, and be like, wow, they're actually doing it. Stuff I could only dream of, they're doing it. They're going beyond it. That's the hope. Um, yeah. I guess I haven't said yet in this video, please don't have a kid for selfish reasons. Don't just have a kid so you can have someone to lecture, or, because you think, oh, what about our precious ethnic, group we have to keep. Okay, unless you are a group that is actually, like, being targeted, but, like, don't do it if you're, like, a white person in a white majority country. Come on, let in immigrants and actually let them make the world a better place, and stop worrying about, like, a birth rate decline when there's so many people all over the world and so many immigrants who would love to be part of your country and make the world a better place. Don't have kids just because you're worried what'll happen if you don't. That's not a good reason. Your kids are going to feel that they aren't really loved, that they're just there to fill a quota or something. I'm going to move on. I think the, let's see. I guess that pretty well brings us to, let's see. Yeah, I thought it worked really well. That, like, I mean, it's a thing in this movie. It's a big thing that they end up losing. Like, people don't have faith in them. And there's the thing about, how did you defeat Galactus? We didn't. And that was a good moment also for Johnny, where he's like, not yet, we will. Because, like, Reed he's so shocked by what just happened, he can't really handle this situation right now. He's maybe never great at explaining stuff like this to get, and not when the situation is that dire. I also like that he's basically like Bill Nye, and they're, like, bored, and he says, well, I'm a cishet man, and then the conservatives freak out, but then he's like, who wants to see an explosion? That was great. I would watch Mr. Fantastic, teaching science. I would definitely, be down for that. And that, again, feels like something that would actually happen. I don't remember it being a thing in any of the comics, but yeah, like, because that's, like, he likes to teach, he likes to explain these things. He likes to understand and then, get that knowledge out there. And yeah, the idea of making him this kind of Bill Nye teacher type, great idea. And that was also something, as soon as we saw it in the trailers, like, that's a good direction to take it in for this. I think that does bring, but yeah. So people lose faith in them. People are like, there's a thing about, oh, we didn't defeat him. Okay, follow up. What do you mean you didn't defeat him? Isn't that a follow-up? Isn't that kind of the... No, I guess it's not quite the same question again, but whatever. It's, they and people start, standing outside the building and like holding up signs and like, basically saying, enough with the lockdown. I mean, not giving up your baby to the world eater. And she comes down there and brings the baby. And I like that, ultimately ADR, so that person probably, the voice actor probably wasn't paid very much. They get paid more if they show their face as they're saying the line. But, one person says, how dare you bring your baby here? As if that isn't literally the whole, like, no, you're trying to, like, dehumanize this baby and turn it into an object, like a solution to a problem that there are other, hypothetically could be, at least, they haven't gotten there yet, but they're working on it, having other solutions to. And you're like, well, don't show me the baby, now I can't hate it. Like, they give away the game, as conservatives often do, under pressure. under the right kind of pressure, at least. I think that might just about, but yeah, she gives that really excellent monologue. It was a cool statue, and I like that we don't. I don't think we get like a one clear shot, but like over time we get several shots, and by the end it's like, oh right, okay, so like Ben is at the bottom holding up the others, and you have Sue holding up her hands in the way she does, and you've got Johnny flying and Reed stretching. So yeah, I think that might just about bring us to, yeah. I also like the thing about talking about Archimedes, and the thing about oh, we solved the small problem, then we solved the big problem. We can move heaven and earth, and then and she says, I think does she also say move heaven and earth to stop this or something like that, and yeah, he's like, but that is the solution. And it's such a great, because like it goes from being this metaphor and almost like slogan kind of thing, it's like that's how we'll do this, to literally being the solution. And it is clever. Like, yeah, it would 100% have worked, move Earth so far away from Galactus that, yeah. Right, it was also really cool. I haven't talked that much in detail about the action. It was always really cool. All the space stuff was incredible. I really felt the scale and scope, and yeah, it combines the comic book thrill of, like, because they're being chased by a silver woman on a surfboard, but at the same time, yeah, there's this thing of like, well, we got to be careful because the hull integrity, it's like Apollo 13. Is that what that movie's called? I still haven't watched that. At some point, I might. I know it's obviously significant, like pop culture wise. Anyway, but yeah, I thought that really worked. This mix of the two. There's not this comic booky thing of like, well, the shield will hold no matter what we do. No, it's like genuinely they have to be careful. And also the thing with Johnny, the fire and putting, because that's, again, when you have a character that powerful, because one of the first things we see him do is like soak up a bunch of fire, and it's like, okay, this guy is really, really powerful. Well, in space, if he uses up all his oxygen, no one can hear him scream. So that was a great, and he does use it, and he manages to get, although some of it he spends like flirting with her, but yeah. And the thing with, oh, she already dumped you. But the let's see. Okay, I'll just very briefly say, so I thought Julia Garner did an amazing job. I don't need it to have been Anya Taylor-Joy. I will say I think it did make sense. I forget if it was ever more than a rumor, but she has played non-human characters before, and I haven't seen them yet, but I would like to, and I hear she did an amazing job in at least one role where she played and she could definitely have done it. In general, I think the in IMDb trivia you can read alternate casting choices. I think almost all of them make sense in one way or another. I don't think I'm gonna go over them. I'm not gonna go over them here, but yeah, I could see the various ones for the most part, at the least. I guess if you want my opinion on a specific one, let me know in the comments. Engagement. Anyway, let's see. I think. So yeah, the thing about not showing the origin story obviously frees them up to do other stories, and yeah, I thought it really worked to focus on what if the world lost faith in them, and then they regained that faith, and everyone worked together to build these machines, and this thing of like nobody gets to tell this woman what she can do with her baby. It's her baby, So yeah. Because, like, yeah, sometimes, I mean, I don't know that I've heard a conservative literally say it'll save the world, but yeah, sometimes Republicans, the way they talk about, abortion and such, you would think it is like, it's like they think they're stopping a genocide or something, which, at the same time, a lot of them are letting genocide happen in Gaza. They're letting Israel, the state. I'm not saying all Jewish people. I'm not even remotely saying all Jewish people. I've met wonderful Jewish people, But yeah, the IDF are doing it, and Zionists are letting it happen. You know, they're not fighting back sufficiently, even though they could use their Jewish identity. And thankfully, a bunch of people, I've seen a number of Jewish people say, not in my name, you're not, no, this is not what I want as a Jewish person. Stop killing, you know, all these innocent people, including children, you know. But yeah, American white conservatives are like, oh, what about white babies? What about actual living, you know, because so much of the time they're obsessed about it's a fetus, it's not viable yet, you know. Because they do want to, they're targeting like contraception. They're you know, trying to ruin sex ed so that young women will become pregnant because they don't know how to not become pregnant, and then they're forced to carry to term and raise a baby they can't afford because they're not even old enough to have a job yet. And the guy leaves because he doesn't want the responsibility, which, like, okay, it's one thing if you had such bad sex ed that you had no idea what was going to happen, but otherwise, if you impregnate a woman, yeah, you should do what you can to help with that baby. If you simply cannot be there in person, then at the very least financially. And I don't just mean, you know, well, if she asks for, I want to say it's called alimony? I can never remember the child support. Yeah, something like that. You know, I'm not, you know, not just that, but whatever you can spare to help make sure this baby can be raised. Because a lot of guys are simply unwilling to help raise a baby that they didn't father biologically, which is ridiculous. It's still, listen, if you become part of that family unit and the you know, mother is okay with it, and like ideally the kid is as well, if you become the stepfather, if you adopt that kid, yeah, you're their dad, you know. And that's a wonderful thing. Like, there are some incredible stories about some, you know, kids who, you know, yeah, they maybe didn't know their biological dad, but they had an amazing stepfather, and they, you know, yeah, because like it's not wrong for a kid to have two moms or two dads. Studies show that it's about love, but it is not ideal for a child to only have one parent. And it's extremely important to underline, it is usually the fault of either the father or someone else, not the biological mother, that she is a single mom. You know, sometimes it's the government putting away the father for something that maybe should barely even be a crime, like possession of a tiny, you know, look me in the eye and tell me you never smoked a little marijuana. I think that I'll do it for you. I never smoked a little marijuana. Anyway, I think that does bring us nicely to the, yeah, just incredible escape from Galactus, and the thing about, you know, they have to go, you know, so they use the FTL to get, and the thing about, you know, well, I can't shoot her because the field is warping, and they actually made it look amazing, you know. Okay, so real quick, obviously, I love Lawrence Fishburne. We all love Lawrence Fishburne. Nobody, I don't even want to hear from you if you don't love Lawrence Fishburne. Like, okay, tell you what, drop me in the comments if you don't love Lawrence Fishburne. Let me know why. I want to know what you've seen Lawrence Fishburne do in a movie that made you not, that didn't make you love him. Because I don't think I have even one example of something. I've watched him a bunch of stuff, and just like, okay, Predators, not his finest hour. I feel like he did what he could. It was more like the writing and maybe direction. Anyway, let's see. And please don't make that the one thing you've seen him do. Anyway, I don't think that Silver Surfer was all that interesting. It didn't hit that hard when he explained the background. Here it did. And like in both cases, I knew from the comics what the backstory was, you know, so it's not like the surprise of it or anything, but you know, a lot of these movies, I know what the backstory is going to turn out to be, but it still hits if the movie's well directed, and I don't think, you know, yeah, the first three theatrical release live action Fantastic Four movies were not well directed for various reasons. Anyway, I think that does bring us to, yeah, they made the Silver Surfer look incredibly cool here, and they made her interesting. which I do appreciate they tried to do in the 2007 one. I don't think they succeeded. And I just didn't feel that much for Norin Rad in that movie, one way or the other. I felt for Shia LaBeouf here from right away. Like, you see, like, there's some sadness there, and the bit with, what was it, die with your own or something like that. The fact that, because she does, he grabs onto the board, and in some ways she's like, huh, because, like, what is he even doing? Does he think he can stop me here? I can fly into space. He's earthbound. What is even, so she leans down, gives him the time of day, I suppose, which is fitting because he asked what time it was, and actually speaks to him in her own language. It's a strangely, like, sort of, I don't know if intimate moment is the right way to put it, but a moment, like they shared something, and he doesn't explain it very well because he's like, oh, she looked amazing, and then I saw myself reflect in her face, and we're like, yeah, I know, Johnny, you don't have to say, I'm in love with Mia, big deal, you've always been in love with Yua. But I think that might more or less, yeah, the space, the fact that they actually have to give birth, and the thing about you can't give birth without the gravity, and they go to that other place. She makes the place invisible, after the next contraction, which I also appreciate, like acknowledging, yeah, it's a pretty stressful situation for her, but I'm not the right person to say if this is a good way to handle. I await, I'm sure female feminists here on YouTube will talk about, if this is a respectful way to deal with pregnancy. I'm not going to touch that one. I really do not want to be, like, mansplaining pregnancy, like, holy crap, do I not want to come across as if that would never... If any video of mine comes across as that, please let me know. I will edit that part out, because that's... And I will apologize. I will make a video where I say, I said that and that's messed up. I've edited it out now. I apologize. It was wrong. Anyway, I'm gonna get to the... But yeah, she makes the entire thing invisible, and they fly away. And Silver Surfer thinks that they're still there, so flies there, and then they become visible, and she gets sucked in. Very nicely done. And, buys them some time to figure out about the... Yeah. I think that pretty well gets us to the... But yeah, super good element with Johnny, the Rosetta Stone thing. And it's true. Once you know a few words of... And I would love, I hope, if the following is you, please drop me a note, because I would love to hear from, like... I love languages. I'm not that good at learning them, like, permanently, but I love learning, like, hearing, oh, in this language, when you say that, it actually, technically the word translates as this thing. It's so fascinating because a language is a window into that culture, that philosophy, the way that they think about things. I've my father is, absolutely really, really loves Greenlandic culture, including languages, and he's told me a lot of things, and it's so unbelievably interesting. All these things that, like, just, you hear it, and it's like, I guess that is what that is, isn't it? Or at least that's how they would perceive it. It's so fascinating. I hope that this movie has people thinking, can I do that Rosetta Stone thing? Because, yeah, like, if you have enough words and sounds, if you know what certain specific sounds mean, what letter or word they correspond with, and what certain words mean, you don't necessarily need a huge amount. Yeah, you can start translating. That is something that has been done in the real world, and it's wonderful. It's such a learning experience to absorb a new language, and just, like, it's amazing. It's such I'm so glad that I was able to... I learned a bunch of Latin and ancient Greek, mostly from my father, but also some in school, and yeah, there's so many words where you can really understand, oh, that's what that thing is, and that's how that relates to this other thing, and just, yeah. I am slightly mixed on the scene specifically of, so yeah, Johnny, flies out there, and suddenly, he sets the signal, and suddenly all these screens are showing the actual, showing, showing the wave bit from when you play a sound, and stuff is played, and it's like overwhelming for her, and he basically explains her backstory to her, which is, it's one of those things, like, I appreciate that he figured it out. That is cool and interesting. It does feel a little bit weird. Okay, I guess I don't want to give away exactly, but I'll just say, if I had a nickel for every time a comic book movie that's come out in relatively recent years, where someone like sort of explains their backstory to their backstory or someone else's backstory to another character in a slightly weird kind of way, I would have at least 2 nickels, which is not a lot, but it's weird that it happened twice. But yeah, it ends up making her change her mind, and I did appreciate it. It was great seeing Julia Garner actually, without the CG. I also like the thing about, this naked girl. She's probably not naked. It's almost definitely a polymer covering her body. Just that little, because it is like, I don't know if it needs to be said, but I'm sure some people need to hear it. Like, yeah, she's not, the character's not naked. Like there's something covering them like that. Anyway. I think that does bring us to my thing about, so yeah, I did really appreciate this idea of her redemption, which again, it's part of Silver Surfer mythos. Oh, by the way, if you are someone who's like, well, should Shalabal even be the Silver Surfer in this movie, because like in the comics, you can put that in my comment section, but I'm probably not going to respond to it, because like, seriously, like you're upset that Silver Surfer is a woman now, because in the comics, I'll grant, I don't think I've read a comic where Shalabal was I've read several where Norin Rad was, but first of all, we need more diversity in these stories. We need to teach young, influenceable, people that diversity is our strength, because it is. We need to get away from this thing of like everything important is done by cishet white men. It's the kind of thinking that leads to people, actually being upset when they hear, oh, here, it was actually something important done by someone who was not a cishet white man. Like, think about this ridiculous purge of like information on American government websites where like, dude, this was stuff that actually happened. It wasn't like made up to make these individuals or this minority group look good. It's something that actually happened. Now you're like trying to teach off, you're trying to remove that from like history education because it makes you feel less special. Like, think about how pathetic that is. Like, holy crap, I'm a white cishet man. I love learning about people who have identities very different from my own, actually making incredible things. Like, I'll just briefly say, so Stan Lee would have quit Marvel Comics if not for his wife. Let's see, I think Joe or Joanne, something like that. So there you go. J.K. Rowling, might be a bad Joanne, but there are good Joannes, or were. She's, yeah. Joanne Lee is, of course, dead by now, sadly. But, he was about to quit. And then she was like, you know what? Make one comic that you feel passionate about. If they, let's see. If it, crap. I just heard that quote too. I'm sorry. You can look it up. But she said that, and he was like, okay, I guess I'll try. And he did, and I believe that was, in fact, Fantastic Four. And it became a huge success. And he stayed at Marvel for, decades after that and kept making these amazing characters that we know and love. That would not have happened if not for a woman. A woman saved A New Hope. Star Wars probably wouldn't have become as big. Have you seen the clips from like, what George Lucas thought should be in the movie? I don't know what he was thinking with all this stuff that, you know, thankfully she cut. And like, you know, okay, to be clear, like George, you know, okayed those cuts, but they weren't his idea. They were her idea. Mouth's dry. Not gonna pick up a 40 though. Anyway, then we have the yeah, you know, women and other minorities have done so many such amazing things. So I am not the right person to talk about. So I'm, you know, I mentioned I'm slightly mixed on this thing of, you know, cause I don't know. I don't think it is. I worry slightly that some conservatives, although I mean with their terrible media literacy, we have to, I guess, I have to be careful not to worry too much about, because they're gonna misread everything anyway, no matter what, you know. So the Otterly Noah has done several videos talking about, you know, wait, how did you think this was? Let's see, recent one he did was on Japanese culture, and yeah, you know, several times he'll point out, how did this YouTuber think that this is supporting their worldview? It obviously is criticizing it, and just, yeah. So I guess I shouldn't worry. It just, I hope no one watches the scene and takes away from it that, like, oh, you know, women are gonna be, you know, they're gonna get terrible ideas in their heads and they're gonna do horrible things until a man stops them and explains to them what's wrong. But I mean, on the other hand, like, that doesn't at all happen with Sue. And I do appreciate, you know, this is a progressive channel. We support women's rights and women's wrongs. You know, Jessica Jones is one of my all-time favorite pieces of media. The 3 seasons of the Netflix show, you know. Overall, I think they did just enough, in my opinion. And I'm not saying, you know, if you are a female feminist, I'm not saying you're wrong if you disagree. Overall, I think they did just enough to make it clear. No, you know, she needed someone to realize where she was coming from and, you know, remind her the, you know. And I do also think, like, yeah, because I don't even remember Norrin Rad in, like, that movie. Did he just kind of just, like, I don't know, I guess I'll switch sides now. Like, you do kind of need a dramatic moment, and I felt like the movie had a significant dramatic moment to get the Silver Surfer, to get Galactus Herald to really change their mind. You know, you can't just have them change. Again, maybe it was good in that movie. I don't remember. I don't think it hit very hard. Tell you what, I did a video on it. I guess maybe I talked about if it hit me hard when I watched it, but the fact that I just do not remember anymore, even though, you know, these are my favorite characters in the comics, like, I feel like that speaks volumes. But I don't know. Sometimes I just have a bad memory, even if it's stuff I like. But I remember not liking that movie very much, so I can imagine that element was also handled badly. Yeah, because they capture him and they, like, torture him, and then he explains his backstory to Sue, and I think they have a conversation. Is that where he changes his mind? And it's like, I mean, so he distinctly remembers that he, you know, he started out this way, and he just doesn't really realize the tragedy of, you know, all these lives he's helped Galactus claim just so that his own world would be safe. Because that is the thing. Like, I felt like in this one, had she straight up forgotten? Because, like, the way she reacted, I don't know. I'm not 100% sure. It might be a scene I need to watch at least one more time to fully appreciate. It just, maybe especially because he was telling her this and she didn't stop and say, I know all this. What are you trying to say? So she, you know, she seemed overwhelmed, but maybe that was the screams of agony of those she helped Galactus kill. Maybe that's what's going on. And that was also really appreciated. Yeah, I mean, shouldn't be bold to take an anti-genocide stance, but sadly today, right now, sometimes it kind of is. Like, there's a lot of, you know, a lot of people, a lot of corporations and such that, and corporations are not people, and Mitt Romney is not my friend. Trans people are my friends, but there's a lot of people in corporations that refuse to take a hard stance, you know, and support BDS, because, like, we're not, we're not asking for the impossible. We're just saying support as you can. Help spread the information about it. Support BDS. Just do what you can, because like right now, there's so many. There's such hard clamping down of freedom of speech. People saying there shouldn't, the IDF should not be committing genocide against Gaza, and then the people saying that are being treated as if they are terrorists, which is completely ridiculous. That's the opposite. It's the opposite of terrorism. But that's conservatism for you. They take reality and flip it upside down. I'm gonna move on. Yeah, I don't know. I think overall, I come down on, because ultimately, if it is a man who stops a woman from doing bad, that doesn't mean that that man is better than all women. And obviously, like, if you are a man doing a good thing and there's a woman doing an evil thing, yeah, like, from an ethical standpoint, I'm not saying you're like, oh, biologically superior or something, and you shouldn't automatically get paid more, get hired easier, get fired less easily, for the same offense, all that stuff. But yeah, like, if you are in a situation where because yeah, I can imagine there are situations out there where a man was the one to stop a woman who was doing something evil, and yeah, I mean, imagine if someone had been able to convince, Margaret Thatcher, for example, to not do evil, and yeah, I'm absolutely not going to pretend like there are not women who've done evil things. I do think it is noteworthy. I mean, Margaret Thatcher was essentially just doing stuff that men were doing, so like, we shouldn't act like she's, oh, she was bad because she was a woman. No, it was the conservatism that was the problem. She just did, and the fact that, yeah, she chose to emulate men in order to get power. That doesn't make all women bad, obviously, not in the slightest. It's just, it is also bad when women do it. It's not automatically good just because a woman is doing it. Just as something isn't automatically good or bad based on who is doing it. There are certain things that are good, certain things that are evil. Context matters, but a lot of the time it's not about, and that again is something like, there's so many conservatives who act like, well, if a man is doing it, it's automatically good. There's that thing about, oh, if women talk, about someone when that person isn't present, oh, it's like gossip and it's evil, and oh, they're so shallow. But when men do the exact same thing, it's like networking and it's strengthening, and they're learning, they're sharing knowledge. No, they're doing the same thing. You're just trying to trying to paint women in a bad light automatically. Even though, like, listen, I have witnessed gossip from women and from men. Not so much anymore, but when I was younger, when I was a teenager, and something I pretty quickly noticed was a lot of the times when the women were like, let's call it gossip regardless of the gender. I hope that one day gossip will become just a neutral term, just descriptive. When the young women were gossiping, they were trying to find a solution to a problem. Like, I remember there were some where they were like, well, I mean, her boyfriend is abusive when he becomes drunk. How do we get her to she has to make him an ultimatum. She has to say, listen, as long as you're abusive when you're drunk, I can't be with you if you drink until you get drunk. And that's final, That's what the girls were saying, whilst like the guys were like planning bullying or trying to, find out something, negative about someone so they could laugh at them and crap like that. But we're supposed to think that the girls and women are bad and the boys and men are good. It's completely ridiculous. Anyway, patriarchy sucks. I think I may have already said that, but yeah. Um, okay, I'm just gonna real quick. I'm afraid I'm gonna mispronounce that, but if I had to guess, Talus the Introvert makes amazing videos talking about, criticizing patriarchy. Recently did a video on crap, like Invisible Labor, I think it was called, but yeah, every video I've seen by them has been really excellent. I think that does bring us nicely to let's see. Yeah, and I mean, I don't know, see, one thing I definitely do want you to take away from this video, when a lot of the time, I would say probably a majority of the time, when I, on YouTube, hear criticism, like fair criticism, honest, good faith criticism of a minority group or individual member, and or it comes from other members of the same minority group, or at the very least ones like related, and a lot of the time when I hear members of the majority criticize minorities, what they say doesn't make any sense. It's just like nonsense that only exists in their heads. Like, remember when there was that thing about, oh, they're eating the dogs, they're eating the cats, and like Kamala was like, what, and yeah, like that is a very understandable reaction to something that absurd. That's what they say about them. And then on the other hand, you'll hear actual, like, okay, so it's not the exact same group, but Foreign Man in a Foreign Land, has done videos where he talks about, okay, so this is an aspect of, because, like, let's see, he criticized black people for there are a number of black people who are very anti-LGBTQ plus, and he came out and criticized that, and again, like a lot of, even when I hear like white conservatives say, oh, this ethnic group is actually really anti-LGBTQ plus, they'll then say, like, because that's something they try to use to justify the genocide of the people of Gaza, and it's like, I mean, you really think that justifies genocide? Nothing can justify genocide. Genocide is inherently evil. It is something that has to be stopped. And you're saying, oh, well, they don't actually like this other group of people. Like, it's ridiculous. It's completely absurd to obviously, nobody's saying, I haven't heard even one person on the left claim that, like, oh, every single person in Gaza is a saint. Why do they need to be? We got to get away from this perfect victim. It's a fiction. Nobody's a perfect victim. Everybody has said or done something that would bother someone who, might otherwise be, if they hadn't done that, I would definitely support them. We should support people who are they're just trying to survive, Not every single person in Gaza, was part of the yes, I acknowledge, obviously it was bad. The crap, was it October 7? I feel like that's the date. Yes, that was bad. But that doesn't mean you should punish people who didn't do it, who had nothing to do with it, who just, yeah. I'm going to move on. I think that does pretty much cover, I love that they, again, I appreciate, choosing Galactus, kind of obvious, Fantastic Four and all. But yeah, I appreciate, because he's one of the most comic booky villains out there. He devours planets, like they even point that out in a very MCU fashion. How do you devour a planet? It is like something, but just if you go with it, don't try to understand it, feel it. If you just feel it, it's like, I want them stopped. They're because it's, yeah. It only really works if you let it. work. You can also think of it as like modern mythology. I think that's a healthy way to look at a lot of comic book stuff that is otherwise silly, because in some mythologies you do have this thing of like, oh, they devour or destroy the entire world, and some religions as well have it. I feel like there's something else I really wanted to say about this. Um, right. Yeah. The bit where so Ben and Johnny are like, okay, who's gonna check on them, and they're both like, not it, and Johnny says several annoying things, and then Ben is like, listen, Frank, Johnny. Um, right. So the thing based on the trailers, I thought this was going to spend more time exploring, Ben like being bothered by his new physical appearance. Ultimately, it went by fast, and they don't really do very much with it. I suppose. Okay, so the thing is, he at first he says, "Oh, I can't come in and join you right now," which also fair enough. Like he's returning from an errand, like um, this someone who just gave birth asked him to run an errand. Don't keep her waiting. Don't be a jerk. You can see this woman later. You know where she works. It's a thing. Also appreciate the mention of because I believe that is from the comics. When Ben was a kid, he would sometimes steal, and that doesn't make him a bad person. Steal like food and such. And they do briefly mention the car crash that killed members of the family, the Storm family. I think that might... Right, I like that they never refer to her as Invisible Girl, but always Invisible Woman. That's always... I can't stand what they do. If it's if it's a male equivalent, he's man, but if it's a female equivalent, oh, girl. Why? Like, she's out there saving lives. Why do you insist on making her seem smaller and less competent? Like, just, yeah. I think that does... Yeah. Right. So I did appreciate, there was a time where Ben could have gone in with Natasha Lyonne's character, and he chose not to, and it seemed like that was because of his appearance. And then, there's the thing about, well, the world's going to end. And so he goes in there and said, no, I kind of wanted to talk to you. That was sweet. I just wish they did more. Maybe the two of them will get more time in a later film. I do think that could work. Let's see. Then we have the... But yeah, I thought they would spend more time on it. I don't think it's a huge problem that they didn't. And I did really appreciate... I guess they had to choose. They felt they had to choose, because there's so much other stuff going on in this movie. And the choice they made was to focus, instead of, let's spend some time with him, like, being playful and, showing these kids what they want to see, the thing about lifting the car. And I did also like, now throw the car. You want me to throw the car? Because it's like they're 9, they just, and then she comes out and says, maybe you should throw the car. That was, yeah, I thought that worked. And again, it's something we just didn't see in the other movies. And it's like, I'm sorry, but that's one of the coolest things. Like, imagine if you were like 9 and you saw someone who could lift a car with their bare hands, that B-A-R-E hands. I'm sorry, you would be like, hey, can you show me? I would love to see that, just like, it's like autograph, sort of thing. And to not get it in the others, when that is like part of the comics. I've read comics where he does like show off for people who are like, oh, that's so cool, because it is cool, and him being able to find something positive, despite, because obviously he is bothered by his appearance. And I do also think, yeah, they can make it a thing in one of the next ones, maybe one of the Avengers films, that, maybe someone sees him for the first time, because we didn't see anyone see him for the first time. That was also cool. The rocket is down, and then we see the orange fist just put, and then we see him like pull the massive ship. Great animation on it be, his rock form being wet from that, because water is difficult to animate, that's that's actually why, that there was a an Assassin's Creed game where you couldn't play as a woman because women are too difficult to animate. Water's the same way. But that was such a ridiculous excuse. Anyway, I'm glad they got roasted for it at least. I think, where does that? It gets us somewhere. Where does it get us? It gets us all the way. Do not pass go. Do not collect $200. Yes, an Avengers film. Maybe someone sees him for the first time and is like scared. Maybe they yell out like an MCU PG-13 safe slur or something, and he's like bothered by it and maybe even loses his temper, and they have to like do damage control and like fix his image with PR or something. Like they can do something with it is what I'm saying. I think I will say, when I heard that Natasha Lyonne is going to have some relationship with Ben, I thought she was going to be, I want to say the character's name is Alicia Masters, and do the Beauty and the Beast thing where she can love him and she is blind, so yeah. I mean, I get it's one of those things. You also do want to be careful about, like, you don't want your movie saying the only way someone can love a person who's conventionally unattractive is if that person is literally blind. Like, he's and she does clearly, she's open to I mean, I don't know if it's like love or something, but she's like, hey, come on in, we can talk. I mean, that's, yeah, it's a start. Right, and they actually, they mention, Jewish, identity. I don't, again, I hope I've made that clear by now. It's not all Jewish people, it's Zionists. And the wonderful thing is, if you are a Jewish person, if that is your heritage, your identity, your religion, you can reject Zionism. And we've seen a bunch of people do exactly that, because we're not talking about you having to become like nomads again. Obviously, that is not the world we live in anymore. I don't think I know even one leftist, prominent, respected leftist, who doesn't want Jewish people to have a country where they can live and not feel like any minute now they're going to be kicked out of the country by a religious majority that is not Jewish. We're just saying, just live in peace and harmony with the Palestinians. It is possible. It is doable. It's just that the IDF and Netanyahu don't want it to happen, because Netanyahu has to distract from the corruption. And that's really it. He's using these people. He's sacrificing their lives, Palestinian lives. Yeah. And it's horrific. And it's not, you're not less Jewish, you're not less safe for living in peace with Palestinians. So many Palestinians, they just want a normal life. They just want to live in peace. They're not trying to attack you. Anyway, we're gonna move on. And when Hamas attacks Israel, like, note that they're not actually very effective, whereas the IDF counterattack is very effective and deadly, and a number of times has hit civilians even before the increase of the pushing the throttle on the genocide that they started, I guess, almost 2 years ago by now. Anyway, I think that might more or less cover. Okay, so yeah, there's obviously one really big thing left. I think that is it for the... I love the fact that, they do have to work with Harvey, and it's this thing of like, well, they met under bad circumstances, but they can work together, and, immigration can be a thing, and yeah, there are real life equivalents where, at first there were there was animosity, and now they're friends. You know, France and England fought a war with each other for 100 years, not literally nonstop for 100 years, but, you know. It's called the 100 Years' War. You can look up the details. I'm not going to go over it right here. But now they're allies. You know, it's doable. It just requires communication and trust, and that's what we see here. You know, and yeah, he felt like he had to get a few jabs in. He had to say something. You know, and I did that. You know, don't be mad, Johnny. I'm not the one who dressed you. That's kind of funny. I'm not gonna lie. I think that does almost get us to the and yeah, you know, the fact that immigration saved lives, you know, and the reason, part of the reason that it did was that the, you know, the country, or yeah, the place that allowed the immigration openly allowed it instead of trying to prevent it, you know. Again, that's something, you know, I hope one day, you know, there are some countries that are already doing it, but for example, America really needs to get much better at immigration. You know, it's worth noting some of the illegal immigrants being deported right now, they tried to become, you know, ICE literally went to places where there were like immigration hearings, so they were doing the process. They were doing what you said you wanted them to do. You said, you Republicans said, we just want them to be illegal immigrants. Why can't they be legal immigrants? If they're illegal, we're going to kick them out. They were trying to become legal. You made the process so arduous, and then you arrested them before they were done with the process. Like, it's completely absurd. It's bigotry, brain rot. You just hate these people. You just hate brown people. You hate people who weren't native born. You know, Stephen Miller, he feels like he has to hate someone. Apparently he was bullied in school. I've heard slightly conflicting reports. Let's hypothetically say he was bullied at school. You know what he could have done? He could have once he was in government, I mean, he could have made a program that fought bullying. I would openly have said, Stephen Miller, I really respect fighting bullies. That is something we desperately need. But no, he became an even worse bully than that. It is literally impossible for the bullies he may have faced in school. I'm not saying he did or didn't. It is literally impossible for them to have done as bad to him as he's now doing to immigrants. You know, there are children being deported. There are families being separated. It's so ridiculous that they do these horrible things and then claim that they're the good guys. I think that does bring us to, yeah, so I thought it was very interesting that the end wasn't some, like, fight of them, you know, beating up, you know, at one point, Johnny sets fire to, you know, there's the thing, I love them doing teamwork, them working together, using their powers together. That's also something that could have been done better. There was a little bit of it, but they could have been done better in the other movies, you know. I think it was Anthony Gramuglia who pointed out, you know, why is the fight so short at the end of the 2005 movie? It's like, this was what we built up to, and I also remember feeling that it's ridiculous. It's over so quickly, you know. I mean, at least they are working together, using their powers in a way that, but it shouldn't be over that quickly, and that was a problem for a number of comic book adaptations around that time, you know. And it's one thing I really appreciated about the Daredevil movie, the Ben Affleck movie. The action there, especially in the director's cut. I'm willing to acknowledge the theatrical cut screwed it up, but the director's cut, yeah, it actually, you know, the fights are long enough that there's an impact felt, you know, and plentiful enough. That was another thing, and especially the ones that were like special effects heavy, and for some of them it's like, just do it in animation. What are you doing? Why are you, you know, and for some of them, it was too early to do those kinds of effects. Like I already mentioned, the rubbery, you know, the bad rubbery effects on the stretching in the 2005 movie. And also some of the 2007 movie. My God, the bachelor party, the stag do thing. Wow, that was, so the rubbery dance thing. Terrible. Absolutely terrible. And just an unnecessary scene. Why is it in there? What are we doing? Are we really still doing in the year 2007, are we still doing this silly thing of like, oh, she sees him dancing with other women, she's not gonna like that. So why does he do it? It doesn't even feel in character. I can't think of even one comic where I would have believed that Reed would just do that like that. Like, I don't know, maybe if he was under like really intense pressure, but it didn't feel like that. It just felt like, oh, this is the trope we're doing, because he was like smiling while he was dancing. It didn't look like he was like exhausted and just like whatever. um I think that does cover. Yeah, so at one point, so yeah, Ben throws a truck, oil, something, truck onto Galactus. Then Johnny sets it on fire, and Galactus is like, dude, I was a stuntman before I became the Devourer of Worlds. I've done full body burns. This is nothing. But yeah, I had thought that it was going to be like a big fight. In one way or another. Maybe they would be fighting Shalabal for a while, because you could somewhat see, if all four of them, got together, maybe they could try various things to fight her, hand to hand, or throw stuff at her or something. But yeah, it's mostly like they're trying to get Galactus to get into the field, and they have to hit the timer and everything. But yeah, I loved Sue using the force field to push, because that's is the kind of thing, it's in the comics, but some of the movies don't really get, like, they think no, all she does is like make a force field and then you can't touch her. Yeah, that's like the baseline. I mean, that's like saying that Johnny can light a cigarette with his finger. Like, yeah, technically, but it's so much more than that. So yeah, I really appreciated that. And the thing of like, you can tell she's pushing herself too hard. This is too much for her. And let's see, yeah, also the bit where Reed is getting like stretched, his face, and the clothing starts to, that was a good, like, if this was R-rated, there would be like, wait, I guess I said this video was going to be PG-13. You can imagine, like, David Cronenberg would have had a field day with that scene, but instead we just have clothes tearing, because it's not nothing, and it has just enough of an effect. And that was also, I was sitting there thinking, oh no, and yeah, several times, like, there were times where I was like, are they really? Is Franklin gonna end up becoming the new Galactus? As they really let us sit with the sadness and the weight of these decisions really nicely throughout the film. But yeah, they're at the end, so they managed to get him into the, and I like that. Yeah, Shalabal, as far as I can tell, self-sacrificing. I guess it's not impossible. Well, let's see. I guess she went to that place that he went to, so it's not impossible we'll see her in a later movie. It just is gonna take a little bit of, it's gonna require someone going there, or her finding a way away from there or something, And Galactus might like try to punish her for what she did, but yeah, she self-sacrifices. She, it's not like she doesn't understand what's about to happen. She was already transported away from where she meant to be early in the film, but she does not want him to devour Earth, and yeah. I thought that was a great moment of redemption. Also because, as when she comes flying, at first we're not entirely sure, is she still fighting? Because she didn't like say, I can't do this anymore. She just flew off after, the reveal. So we don't know if, because sometimes people become all the more determined to keep doing evil after being confronted with evidence that what they're doing is evil. We sadly see that a bunch of times. But thankfully, sometimes, again, the spirit of optimism and hope, she changed for the better. She really did realize how awful it was to keep helping Galactus like this. I hope we do see her again. Julia Garner, an unbelievably talented actress. I gotta see more of her movies. Basically, what I've seen her in so far was Martha, Marcy, May, Marlene. That's one movie, not four. And Sin City, A Dame to Kill For. Now, if you've watched either of those movies, I 100% forgive you if you don't even remember that she was in there, because she does not have a huge amount of screen time, but she made such an impression on me in both of them with very little, you know. I mean, there were others, some of them had more screen time that didn't make very much of an impression on me, but it just worked, you know. And yeah, she's amazing here. I think they could do something super interesting, because this is such fertile ground for stories. She just stopped serving Galactus. And if she, you know, I mean, maybe they could do something with her close to him, but if they get her away from him, what now? What do? You know, like, do you Xena warrior princess it and go around trying to do good, trying to make up for it, and every so often people realize, oh, you're that person, aren't you? Or, you know, yeah, what do you do? It's a really interesting place to have that character. You could maybe even have, like, maybe Galactus as punishment takes away the power cosmic, and she becomes, like, basically a regular person again, and then she has to try to figure out, well, who am I now? Do I go home? Can I go home? Both physically and like, you know, because, like, if she goes home, you know, does maybe someone knows that that's why she left, and maybe they can't forgive her. Maybe we have a story of her trying to earn their forgiveness. You know, there's so much you can do there. Really hope we get to see more of her character. And I think that does bring us to, so the last thing I want to, yeah, obviously, okay, so I want to acknowledge, on some level, I did feel like she's probably not dead when we see Sue not move, you know, and they do the whole thing with, you know, you never gave up on anything in your life, now fight. But they let it actually rest for a little while there. Like, it went longer than, like, Iron Man in Avengers 1, which was also, in that one, it was especially like, there's no way he's dead. Nobody thinks that he's actually freaking dead, because this was such a big success. You know, everybody knew that Avengers 1, you know, once you had watched that far into Avengers 1, we knew this is going to be a massive success. People are going to watch this multiple times and recommend it to their friends. Obviously, they're not going to kill, you know, they're not going to kill the golden goose. That would be ridiculous. But here, like, they let it really rest. And I was starting to think, like, maybe I mean, okay, I don't want to give away. Is that a spoiler? I guess, okay. It is possible that she will appear in something in the future, and I had heard that possibility before I sat down to watch this movie. However, that could be a flashback. I mean, technically, you know, I'm afraid I forget her name, but the actress who plays Peter Quill's mom, she's technically in the second Guardians movie, even though she died in the first. You know, it's a flashback. So, you know, maybe that's how we see her again. I was sitting there thinking they're actually going to do it, and ultimately they didn't. But I do think it would also have been too much if they had really... She just had a baby. You're going to take away the biological mother. I'm not dissing adoptive mothers. Those are... A lot of them are wonderful. But, like, it just, you know... And yeah, ultimately, like, yeah, she did die, but then he brings her back. Now, I am on the record as not being a fan of when a piece of media says, you know, oh, this person is dead, and, you know, you think it's going to be, oh, it's other characters are going to grieve, and then, oh, psych, they actually, you know, they faked their death, or they were brought back to life somehow, or something. Because I think it is extremely important that we learn how to grieve, and media can be a big part of that. But I do think, you know, for one thing, it is like, Franklin is still a baby, and here we have this thing of, like, even there, like, he realizes she's dead and intuitively is able to bring her back to life. So that's how powerful he already is, and that's how much control he already has over his powers. He was able to hide his cosmic energy powers and also be able to, you know, now bring someone back to life. So yeah, at age 4, as we see in the mid-credit scene, yeah, I think Dr. Doom has ideas for what Franklin can do, and I don't think I like what he intends to use Franklin for. I think that... Right, I thought there were a lot of great Mama Bear moments for Sue, and that's also, you know, I know some people apparently think, if a woman is tough, that means she's masculine. No, it can be a feminine trait. It's, a woman being protective of her offspring or family doesn't make her masculine. That is, technically a gender neutral thing, and anyone can be protective of their loved ones. And let's see, I think that might. Uh, let's see. Right. I really like the bit where they're talking about, might our kid have powers, and it is, of course, that again, a lot of parents will go through this thing of like, what if our child, what if you have some genetic trait that you're worried about passing on, because they keep talking about, oh, we got to do these scans, and they do scans, and again, in real life, there are a number of these scans done, and I mean, some people outright choose if an early scan shows, oh, this kid might have this particular trait, yeah, there are cases where, they chose to abort the fetus, and I've already, I think I've made clear, I am pro-choice. I do think they should have that right. I'm not judging. I'm worried I come across as if I'm judging. I think, ideally we try to avoid like third trimester abortions, but that was already the law under Roe v. Wade, despite what conservatives would scream. Um, and now they're like, wait, I didn't think leopards were gonna eat my face. But yeah, I thought it was very interesting that the movie like really faced that issue head on, applied directly to the forehead, and didn't like tiptoe around, because yeah, like the it's a very human thing to think about, what will your child be like, and you even have the line, most fathers want want their son to be an exact copy. I want you to be nothing like me, and that again, like, and I appreciate, is he talking about like superpowers, or is he talking about like, is he worried that, a little baby Reed is gonna be, a menace with his super intelligence? And that was also, oh, he read Darwin's Origin of the Species. I think it's called, the book on evolution. At age 4. That was a great, and okay, now we're gonna go with some Dr. Seuss. Yeah, I think that does pretty well cover it. At some point, I'm gonna buy a new chair, I think. Yeah, right. The bit with when the baby's born. I like, it's very nice, the thing of, Franklin meet Ben Franklin. I guess Ben Franklin's superpower would be like electricity based. That, and a truly remarkable level of hypocrisy around, oh, we're making a free nation, and then, yeah, but some are more equal than others, though.